our first. And it might be the only one, I don't know yet, but I've asked Dr. Terry Locke to come in. I mean, we've been thought partners for a long time. And especially in the last few years when I retired and then took on this. So we realized that with this new board, we really need to have some base knowledge and foundation set so that we can do our job of setting policy for the early learning system. So that's what we're hoping to do today. And I'm going to give it to Terry. So we're going to kind of go back and forth. She's created the slides and stuff, and I'll just jump in when needed. And Terry.
Oh, thanks, Elaine. Yeah, so let's see, it's echo. There's this echo. It's funny, is it because yeah. So we're gonna go through a number of slides, but we're gonna have conversations as we move through them. Conversations we'll have together as a group, but also conversations you might have with a thought partner next to you. Yeah, as Elaine mentioned, she and I have been working together for a long time. I'm also originally from Maui. And so I think the first time I met Elaine was when I was teaching at Maui, at the time, Maui Community College. And she was a preschool director of a neighboring, that was close to the campus. And she was one of our mentor teachers. And so Elaine was amazing as a teacher and director. So I'm so glad that, fast forward, that we've been, working together off and on through these years. Okay, so yeah, I want to welcome all of you. Thank you for coming. I know we're expecting a few more people. We're going to be, this is the agenda. So we're going to spend some time in context setting, and then also quite a bit of time actually in looking at our guiding principles, both the board principles as well as the system principles. And because that has really, those principles are the things that will guide the work of the Early Learning Board. And then we're going to look at kind of an overview of the system, looking at various components of the system, not all of it, but at least to begin that conversation. And then looking at number 5 will be, what does it mean to make policy recommendations to improve what we call a system of systems, because within the system, there are these other systems, and then some action steps, and then we'll be talking through lunch as well. So thank you so much for being here. Kevin, no, I think I'm supposed to get back to my slides, right? Yeah.
Chair, do you know if we're going to have any public guests this time?
It's open. People have to register. I don't know if anybody.
We don't know if anyone registered.
Besides the staff here.
I can see it. So we're going to start off actually with an icebreaker, and this means that we have to get up off of chairs. So we'll use the space on that side, which is, yeah. So, does everybody know each other as well? Actually, it'd be great to, because it's actually more fun if we have more people, so the staff want to join us. You join us too. Okay. So you may have played this really mini game before. It's called This or That. And so you have to think about, like two sides of things. Like, here's an example. Are you a Pepsi person or are you a Coke person? Okay, so one half has to stand on one side of the room and the other half. to do that. So let's start with that. Are you a Pepsi person? You have to go on this side. Are you a Coke person? Okay.
What if you're not a soda person?
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. I'm not a soda person.
Yeah.
I'll choose one. But I used to be a soda person. Okay. Are you a morning person or are you an evening person? Okay.
I thought you'd actually move.
I'm lunchtime. I'm tired all the time. We're just in the middle.
Okay, do you like horror films or do you like comedies? Okay.
Wow.
Okay, so anybody can think of any other thoughts as you move, like what's this and this or that? You can throw in your ideas. Okay, are you,
Town or country?
oh yeah, are you town? Are you live in town or do you live in country? Yeah, that's hard for your.
Or do you think so?
Yeah.
I got a shot.
Okay. Are you a sunset person or are you a sunrise person?
Looks like morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like that, but it's like, what do you appreciate? Do you appreciate
I love the
the
sunrise when
sunrise or the sunset, the way the sunset is? Okay, okay. Are you a water lover, like a sports, love to, love to
Be underwater.
be in the water? Do you love to be in the water or do you like to be on land?
That's a hard one. Is it like in the mountains?
Yeah.
In the mountains.
Yes, you would like to be on the mountains, yeah, so that's a good one thing, mountains and ocean. Okay, any other ideas anybody has?
Dog or cat?
Okay, dog or cat?
Okay.
Okay, dog, cat. Are you deciding?
No. I'm in the middle. I have cats, but I like dogs.
Okay, cat, dog. Great.
Hello.
Okay, time, Dina, are you a dog person or a cat person? Dog. Dog. Anyway, that was one way, a quick way to get to know each other, just like in your mental mind, you can see who was in your place with. Okay. Yeah, so part of today will also be getting to know each other better, for you folks to get to know each other better, and also getting to know also how we all think and how we all think individually and collectively. So glad to see you, Dana. Okay, content setting. Why a retreat?
And just let you know that our neighbor island people are coming a little late, so we have 3 people.
Okay, great. Okay, why a retreat? So I want to kind of turn over to Elaine.
Yeah. Well, kind of what, I said earlier, it's because this is a new structure for this board. And the level of knowledge of early childhood, the previous board, everybody was some sector of early childhood. But this is a different board. It's more representative of the public, I think. And so we do have to have some foundational knowledge in order to be able to do our job. What I've learned is that the legislature has, in the past few years, questioned the existence of the Early Learning Board. Because, the reason they restructured it was because some legislators felt it wasn't doing its job of creating policy. So we are at this real important point in early childhood in Hawaii. It's why, I'm still I retired in 2019, but continue to stay engaged, and largely thanks to Terry, because both of us feel like this is kind of like a tipping point for early childhood in the state. And this board, you guys are really important in helping the state set a direction. So I really, that's why we're doing this, so. And we could go on forever and ever, so we have to really cut it.
Yeah, yeah. And I really appreciate that Elaine has wanting to do this so we can, you know, carve out some time before it starts getting really busy when the legislative session starts. And this is a great time to really set, as Elaine mentioned, set some foundations in place. So you had some handouts, so we're not gonna kind of go over all the handouts, but I've taken some of the pieces of the handout that could help us stay focused today. And this is something that you read at every board meeting, the mission of the Early Learning Board. And also there's a vision. So not necessarily going to have you read it though, because I think you do that and really understand it. But it is something that I feel like the past members of the board have really worked hard on putting those things together, the mission and the vision. And then I want to remind all of us about the role of our early learning board. One is to coordinating the state's early childhood development and education system. And why coordinate is such an important part of that role and system is because when it comes to children under five and under, we really have a fragmented system. We have a system that is made up of a lot of small businesses that really have been serving our children for a long time. We have state agencies that do some parts of it, and they work together in order to do a system. And so coordinating the state system is an important part of it. And it really comes from this vision, goes back to the vision of what do we imagine. And so we're going to get to that, looking at it, the system from different perspectives. The other is making policy recommendations to improve the system. And so, as Elaine mentioned, this is a policy-making board. We'll talk later about policy, what's a policy, what's a non-policy, and then finally overseeing executive office on early learning. Okay, so, yes.
And those recommendations go to the governor or to the legislature or?
Good question.
Yeah.
You know, because,
varies.
yeah, it is a great question because, yeah, we don't want it to just, oh yeah, we made a recommendation, where does it go? So that's part of the communication and collaboration piece that we really need to start nailing down. So it's great. Those are great questions because we got to settle these questions.
Yeah.
And it might depend on the policy.
Yeah. Yes, Bill, yeah, I
Oh,
think Elaine,
yeah.
yes, Steve.
No, I was just thinking related to what Phil was saying, like, I think the question with policy is always like, where does it sit most appropriately?
Yes.
Right.
And I think one of the things, to your point, Elaine, about the legislature's frustration, I think, with the board is
Mhm.
we adopted, I think, one policy
Correct.
Correct.
total, so like,
Yes.
it's a little hard to have, like, the Board of Regents, the Board of Ed, they have a whole policy.
Yeah.
Infrastructure,
Yes.
and so,
Right.
you know, if we have the authority to establish policy for
Mhm.
certain things,
Right.
we gotta figure out where
So
that makes the
we-
most sense.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the other point that Steve makes is really how do we are a new entity, we're still a fairly new entity. We'll talk a little bit about the field itself, but because we have these other structures in place, like the Department of Education,
Mhm.
we have that. Other things that we can look to and how they've made policy, but how they've done that over time. So yes, we have one and we will go for that one today. Okay, so yes, it's a critical role, it's a critical time. So one of the things we want to keep in mind throughout today, as well as whenever we're working on policies, is we have to keep in mind, who are we serving? we sometimes think we might serve in a state agency, or we might be serving that or this, but we're really looking at what's the best for our community, what's the best for our children, birth through 5, and their families. And so just want you folks to just think about that because, and you know, part of our work to the Early Learning Board and Executive Office on Early Learning is really to be that partner along the spectrum of services that go on, you know, beyond 5, because we know that's a pretty short period of time. But it's critical. We know that based on research and much more. So now we're going to talk about how will the Early Learning Board do the work. So this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about the guiding principles. So
We have that handout
yeah,
here.
so in your packet, yes, so in your packet, to turn to the guiding principles. And they are, and then you can also be free to take notes on this slide handout if you want to. But you see the, I don't know, many pages. It's one that looks like this. It's this handout that says guiding principles.
I think it's, the first page is a vision and mission, and then the guiding
So
principles
this
is
is afterwards, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So because we couldn't get all of this on the slide. So what we have here is really, I took the board principles and just displayed it like this on the PowerPoint or on the slides. So you'll see that, you know, number 1 is integrity. Number 2, transparency, and so forth. So what I would like you to do is take a look at those 7 board principles. Okay, so just look at that. So everybody got that copy of that handout? Okay. And what I'd like you to do is think about the board principle that sort of resonates with you. Just you as a board. We don't have to go through all of them, but just go down the list and think about what one really connects with you. And so give you a few minutes to do that. And what I'd like to do, yeah, so give you a couple minutes to do that. Think about it, look at it. They're all important. So it's hard to choose, but what I'd like to do, if you chose one, I'd like you to turn to a partner and explain why you might have chosen that. But just the person next to you, if you want to, spend a few minutes having a conversation about what board principle resonates. So, yeah, so we'll give you folks a few minutes to talk a story about that.
Yeah.
We take accountability.
Just because I think by definition, it's
So I think so often we.
authority, responsibility, is nebulous. Venn diagram. With various agencies. So it's like by definition. That's why you in the policy.
Yeah.
Simple, but it's kind of weird, actually.
Yeah. I thought this one was the most interesting because, and I circled shared goals and visual as it has. Those two don't. And so I think about partners, that's all this is great, but that's because this we have to look at so how are we gonna match attain that social prior to these new challenges? Feel less threat to full
It's like being willing. Yeah. Oh, you know what I'm saying? Like, previous, no matter what, it's just not one.
And I do also like being willing to like get alcohol. Or else you won't have any much. But the ones that I like most, like I see diversity. So the most best option. So all in one room. Oh, I see. Knowing that like a best option is gonna be.
But we don't know. Like, your point about shared goals, we don't really have.
Okay, I'm gonna give you 30 more seconds.
In the vision of mission.
Well, and then we.
Squid.
Oh, that's good though. How are you? Timer.
Oh, you said that, oh, see?
No, it was my medic.
Oh, okay. I
need an alarm when it's
Oh, I do that too.
But that was the timing.
Good timing. Okay. I know I might be cutting you off in your middle of your sentence, but you know, it was a way for us to kind of begin to think about it with each other. You know, so those are the board principles. And you know, I would say that I can tell by the conversation, some of the, you know, of course, the exercise was to select one. So good job in selecting one and discussing about that. Okay, the next section is actually another activity. And it's called Plays the Thing. So, but I'm not gonna let you play. I was gonna bring a basket of Lego. Time to get all the Lego together at our university. And so what I'd like you to do is, okay, think about play and think about young children. I mean, we play as adults too, and that's really important. But children play in a way that it's actually serious work. So I want you to think about when you, if you can remember, when you were a child, a young child, and what was your like favorite thing to play with? And who would you play that with? You know, who are the people around you that you played that with? And why was that important to you? What did you learn from it? So that's another turn and talk activity. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Share that whenever you're ready. And if you can think that far back, you can think about your own children and perhaps what's their favorite thing they play with and what are they learning from that?
Yeah. So what I.
Look, I can remember playing. Yeah, I got. Sports. Competitive stuff.
Radios were not there. Couldn't be there, you know. And so.
It's like one of those sheets kitchen, and I would just make like just and then close it off and then start over.
My kids play with the kitchen thing too.
So.
Yeah.
That's.
I think I was.
Yeah.
What about your kids?
How about you?
We played cars, like Hot Wheels.
Is it cars?
Anything.
You know, all the names.
Like all those.
Articulated haulers. I was little 2.5
Yeah.
I mean. Like it was good for you, but I remember.
That is either like trucks or
It's
dice.
a summer. Maybe. Even.
But I think some of these, they just like getting boring. And they're using it and they're making. But yes, you.
Schoolhouse. So after I finished my PhD, I worked in.
There's something about trying to get there's a competition. It's one thing required. It's like, but it's different in general, right? Yeah, that's what they feel like.
Do you feel like you rather be like it's the same?
It's a little different. It's a little different.
I would say my
Yes.
I didn't take it apart. Thank
Since
you.
You can make
But yeah,
it
just right
better.
Free, right? And remember how we went home when the sun went down. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh, what's funny how you still want to.
It's really sweet to ever know.
Yeah,
Like sending me emails right now. My God, it's like every birthday.
Yeah, no, yes, well, I guess it was one.
But she and she's not her brother.
Around
He looks up to her so much.
sad.
There's still no
Great.
better.
See that, you know, there's, now we have to pay the fine. I was actually born here.
Must not be.
But I love the special side, so obviously we can talk about.
A little. Not as much.
And then.
There was.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, gosh, perfect. I know that's perfect, it's because there's two of them. Right?
It is true, so it's always like a bend and breathe.
Yeah, you got a buddy at all times, right?
Perfect.
Yeah, it's.
I don't think they should be together.
Here, I'll get you.
Even if they went to the same place, together, that would be.
Yeah.
Because they've always been. together. Surf together.
It's like they're changing together.
It's in, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. With their girlfriend. It's like a whole crew of boys and girls. Although Sam's girlfriend has some like uncle who's gonna come out with a girl, and so we're gonna have to go do all the. So someone else, yeah.
40 years different.
It's salty.
See, I didn't get the, didn't get
But
the.
yeah, I guess it's not the, the uncle thing that doesn't make sense. Everybody's
Yeah. You're fixing your name.
Do a little.
Okay, everyone,
Yeah.
we want to welcome Joni, Kapua, and Alana. And I just told them kind of where we are and where our, you know, what you folks were talking about. Not specifically of what you're talking about, but sort of the exercise. So what I'd like us to do now is taking the guiding principles, which has we started off certainly with the board principles. And then we did this activity called Place a Thing. Well, anybody want to be brave and share like what was your favorite plaything you did? And I don't know what you learned from it. Okay, Phil.
So I shared that my dad worked for Trans World Airlines repairing radios, and when they couldn't be repaired, he would bring them home. And so I spent a lot of time in the garage taking radios apart and putting them back together. And
Yes.
lifelong interest in technology. So,
But he also taught philosophy, so there's these two sides.
Yeah, that's a cool. Like, anybody else wants to share about what your plaything and how it's, what you learned from it or?
Mine was my bike. I used to like to take it apart. I used to like go to the dump, go find other pieces to put on my bike, make my bike look different but workable.
Yeah.
And just for the reason of keeping me busy, keeping me outside. I hated being in the house.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry.
and then it also, like people used to it used to capture a lot of attention on my bike.
Uh-huh.
Like people used to love looking at my bike because I would be like a huge tire in the front with a little tire in the back.
Oh, I hope you took pictures, Howie, of that.
And be like, look at my bike. And then, oh, I guess this is cool.
Yeah, do you remember how old you were when you did
I
that?
was probably about 10.
Okay,
10 to 12, and
Yeah.
I would take it apart and put
Yeah.
it together. And then I would do that till I was throughout middle school,
Yeah.
high school, I stopped, but I got busy.
yeah, but playing, so we talk about how young children play is such a critical part of how they learn and develop, but it is a lifelong thing, you know, and so, we want to see that our children, our youth, our adults also continue to do that. We talk a lot about our own overall health and mental health, and so it's important for us to continue to do that. I think that it was hard during the pandemic when our kids were inside a lot for them to be able to do that. Even I know the adults in our family felt really affected by the fact that we're indoors rather than like we talked about, like how we mentioned about outdoors. So I want us to think about that because the next slide, the next thing we're going to look at is the system principles, and I'll have it on the screen too. But I want you guys to look at the pages you have in front of you. So on the slide, we have 7 principles. And what I'd like us to do is just kind of go around and just say what's in green. I know on this paper it's in green. And or you could, if you can see the slides in front of you, it's really the sentence or phrase. So we'll start with Steve. And Steve, you read this first one, we just kind of go around. And we read the 7 ones. So I can share. Okay. Yeah, so Steve, you want to start off?
Sure. You're talking about the one that starts
Yeah,
with promotes?
Number 1.
Yeah.
Promotes.
Promotes nurturing and responsive relationships that are essential for healthy growth and development.
Values each child's development within a culture and a language.
Considers each child as unique.
Respects each child's development as a whole and acknowledges development begins before birth and continues throughout.
Maintains a strong, sustainable, evidence-based professional system framework is essential to children's growth and development.
Regards that all children are children first, and infants and toddlers are active learners and they learn through play. Values everyone in a child's life playing a role in his or her development.
Yeah, so we want to thank previous board members for putting this together. I think it's really important for us to keep in mind how those impact our system, the development of our system, the coordination of our system. And we'll look at that. So these guiding principles, whether it's the board principles as well as the system principles, are going to be what's going to guide the early learning board in making decisions and problem solving regarding issues that come up and the development of policies. So we're going to be returning back to these as we think about policy development. One of the okay, not this one yet. Okay. One of the things I want to bring up to our board is actually an ongoing conversation around this and in the public. And that is the myths around early education and early care. And we'll tell you about these. You're going to actually, you're going to see what I mean. Okay, so the myths around early education and early care. And so what I have done is there's this book that have been on my shelf, and it's called Illuminating Care, the Pedagogy and Practice of Care in Early Childhood Communities. But before I do, I want you to think about that. What are the myths around early education and early care? So think about it while I look for this other slides I have. So I found it. It's on my screen. Okay, myths about early education and early care. And you might hear this in conversations. There's actually, I just took two myths that I thought would be good for us to focus on. And one myth is childcare and early education are two separate things. Parents are often think that childcare centers and preschools perform different functions. Childcare is viewed as custodial, while preschool is viewed as programs that prepare children for school. You might not think that, but there's the public that oftentimes thinks that. The truth is, care and learning are integrated into quality programs, integrated into a quality program for young children. High quality preschools care with excellence, and high quality childcare centers are intellectually stimulating. Early educators with a developmental understanding are professional our professional body of knowledge to support their work as teachers, promote an integrated vision of care and education. Young children do not separate between educational and non-educational moments. So that's one bit. Have you heard that before, or does that? How do you want to comment on that? I gave it the, went over the myth and the truth. Any thoughts about
I know
that?
that there was an issue around early education being looked at as childcare, primarily childcare versus an educational opportunity for our children. And I believe that was even in the paper. I can't remember. If it was me or if it was others. Change that thinking, but that's an issue too.
Yeah.
I mean,
I also think from a parent's perspective, when you have an infant and or toddler, you think that childcare is an ends to a means, like, oh, I gotta get back to work, so I'm just gonna put them in here, they're gonna be in a safe space. Not really understanding though how a child learns. It's very holistic. It's everything around that's impactful.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the separation. And the truth is really, how do we educate families first so they can be the driver and say, no, my infant, when I send them to this particular caregiver, it's because he do X, Y, and Z.
Yes.
And I know they're getting them ready.
Yeah. So I think we have to help change that narrative in our own thinking and in our own conversations. It starts with our own conversations we have with each other and with our family members and, in our own family and so forth, as well as our neighbors. So, so this is prevalent. In fact, just recently, I think there's a national webinar that's coming out by Dr. Galinsky, who's been around for a long time, about this very issue. And these myths have been around.
But it is the case that some childcare could just be passive babysitting. I mean,
Yeah.
change the diaper and feed them and not do anything.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
then
I
you
mean-
don't want that.
no, we don't want that, but and yes, and oftentimes, okay, here at the College of Education, we try to recruit the next generation of teachers. And periodically, I would get a teacher candidate that wants to be an early childhood educator, but they're discouraged by their parents. Especially if they've, anyway, because there is this notion that I moved to babysitting. Okay, so I think we have to also, and sometimes I think ourselves, like as a early educator for all these years, I also have heard people say, even to me, you know, that what you do is not professional. You're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not, yeah. So, and that has actually been recent. I've heard that recently from somebody that was not in our field. So there is a lot to change in terms of change the paradigm in terms of how we think about that and how we promote that in our
I
education.
was just thinking like, so I think that there's like a myth, but I'm trying to think of like, 'cause I flow in and out of different things. So like in your being, I think we all know that there's always learning, right? There's always learning. In like rules and things like that, though, there is separation. So that part is like not really myth-like.
Yeah.
But I think in understanding, there could be misconceptions about what it is.
Yeah.
But I think that like you as a human, I think everybody here knows that learning is a continuum. And whatever you want to call it, like it's still gonna happen with or without our label.
Yeah,
But I also think that there is this real part where there is
Yeah.
a little bit of a distinction in the world that we live in.
we do, and we have to kind of recognize it. It's also in the kind of funding that's
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
you know, and the
Yes.
separations of our
The separation,
systems.
right.
Here's the Department of Education, here is Department of Human Services, you know, separate kinds of sort of entities and trying to work together. That's why Executive Office of Early Learning came about, was to kind of bring those systems together. So, so good thought, and thanks Yuko for saying that. There's Stephanie, you want to say anything?
I don't know. There's something in here that is interesting to me. It's that prepare children for school.
Yeah,
So I have 2 young kids, and when I think about the choices we've made for them for their early learning experiences, it's never been to prepare them for school.
Yeah.
And so I think that's an interesting thing at a systems level that kind of like means to an end around a system outcome of preparing them for the next part of the system that kind of misses the human aspect.
it
Yes.
does miss, and that is that's also myth in terms of because children are already prepared, they're ready whenever they're ready. It's their systems that are not ready for them. You know, it's
Yeah,
not, our
yeah.
schools are not ready for them, communities are oftentimes not ready for them. So I think we have to really think about, what do we really mean by readiness, preparation, all those things? And it does make families really anxious. You know, sometimes like, okay, you have to prepare them, so you gotta get them ready. And so you see this around potty training, toileting, or toilet learning, we call that, is because parents want to get their child into a program, and the rule is you have to be toilet trained before you do that, and there's a lot of anxiety by families, a lot of anxiety, of course, by the children that, sure.
And I just have a comment. I just love that I guess we're discussing about this. Because I think the whole issue is that even those in our own field may not even know the distinction.
Yes,
So for example, I do know other preschools that have 3-year-olds sitting at desks doing worksheets most of the day.
yes,
And of course, developmentally, that's just inappropriate, at least for those who know. But for some of them, they don't know. And that's how they structure their program. So you can see how even those in their own field.
yes,
So-
exactly. And since Cheryl, you brought that up, the next myth, I want to talk about it because it's actually has to do with how we view things in our own field. This is this one. Okay, childcare is babysitting. So this is a myth. Childcare is babysitting. Okay, but there's also a nuance to this that I think we have to talk about. As early childhood ed teachers, we are professionals and we have chosen to work with young children as a vocation and career. We have a professional body of knowledge and teaching practice that support our work. We're first teachers, and caring is central to our pedagogy and practice. Early childhood educators are working with children during the critical early years that set the foundation for life and for other educational experiences. We have to defend our profession with a valid message that we are not babysitters, but that doesn't mean we disparage babies. So I think that's really important for us to think about that.
Yeah, we have the whole license exempt arena of that's in THS where family, friend, neighbor, caregivers can apply for subsidies. And that's an important piece of our system of systems because many families want that, they want a trusted relative or friend to take care of their young children. And we as a board need to be aware of all these different arenas and not disparage the care. And, I've had, I taught an associate degree program at Orange Valley College. And I've had students that, they do so good on paper, they read, they can make, they can create these awesome papers and then they get them in the classroom with real children. And it's like, there's like a disconnect, you have Ottawa, but not the relationship building capability or ability that's something that really needs to be built in that person. So it's, many people have both, which is great, but sometimes you would see that, good on paper, but in practice, grabbing the child, no, stop, please. So, as a board, we need to be aware of this. We need to address, and it starts with our families and our circles, but thinking on a systems level, like Stephanie was going, how do we get the public aware of this?
I'll add to that. We had one of our high schools do a CT pathway, maybe in 2018 or so, with the early education. And what they had noticed there is those high school students that were in the program felt like it was babysitting. And that's what deterred them from remaining into the program. Yeah. And so if I asked again, with Tony, and I asked her, who's your like demographic of people that are in your classroom? And she had said she gets a lot of young mothers who get interested in the program.
So, with that, Alana, we have embarked on a new ECE apprenticeship program, a registered apprenticeship program with KKOKAINA. And we actually are discovering that through some actual kinds of experiences now. Who's really there? So we have caregiving that's available across our state. People are already caregivers. Many of them are trusted caregivers. And they are oftentimes the ones that love children and want to see them grow and develop. And so that is a kind of an untapped area. And just like Elaine said, so how do we create that pipeline, into our field? I also want to say part of this truth is babysitters may be trusted, intelligent, caring family members, neighbors, teenagers, or friends who support families and watch over children in the evenings and on the weekends for a few hours. So some of us who went into early childhood education, like I started babysitting my own siblings, younger siblings in my family. And that's sort of my foundation of how I started being interested in young children. I didn't really know that. I actually thought I was going to work with juvenile delinquents, but then I realized, I have to start earlier. But think about the people, the trusted caregivers. When I went back to work at a time when, after my youngest was born, my neighbor was actually my trusted caregiver. She was a good friend, but she was also home with her young daughter, and so I was able to have her also watch my youngest. So who are the trusted caregivers around us and trusted caring family members, teenagers, neighbors, and so forth.
Yeah, and I think this is gonna be a complex issue because we want to acknowledge that early education has this body of knowledge that has been built up over decades and decades of research and theory. And we want to acknowledge that early educators for their professionalism. And we want to acknowledge the caregivers. And how we do that is going to be an ongoing conversation. Because
Yes.
it's not an either or. We can't do it either
Yes,
or.
yes,
We have to do
Yes.
both and.
exactly. This one is, unfortunately, by talking about what we're not babysitters, we have also contributed to the view that caring for children is less than education. So that really struck me because I think, okay, yeah, maybe we've said some things too that really are not that helpful. Instead, we need to unite with everyone who plays a significant role in the life of the child. The teacher, the parent, the grandparent, the uncle, the auntie, the babysitter. We need to acknowledge that caring for children, wherever you call it, whatever you call it, matters. Caring matters, and we need to care better everywhere. As first teachers, caring with excellence is our goal. So again, this book I bring to your attention is really about elevating or illuminating care. Because sometimes our whole care economy, whether it's caring for young children or caring for elderly, we don't give enough really attention to that. And that's, and we kind of, yeah. And so that's an important thing for us to think about too. It's caring with excellence. As Elaine said, there are these competencies that our profession strives towards. And part of it is that it is those relationships. It is that, So let me show you a few more slides related to this. And these are, sorry, it's actually on the other handout that I have to get out, but it's on your handout that you have here. So while you can look at those slides while I pull it up again. And okay, and so this is another way of thinking about care and education go hand in hand. So system principles recognize, our system principles basically recognize that care and education are deeply interconnected. We look at children in a holistic way. Right? It's not just their cognitive growth, it really is their physical, their social, emotional, their spiritual growth too. And that's what quality programs look at, the whole child, and the caring environments foster that emotional security, enhances learning exploration. So the environments really matter. Because environments give a message to each child, much more than we can block things out, and we can go into a crowded department store and be okay about shopping. I don't do that good going to those things because I get distracted. But our children see those messages and they can easily have a meltdown because messages bombard children in all kinds of ways. So how we set up environments matter. We want our children to be, calm. We need to create calm environments. We want them to be stimulated. And it's a combination of all that. But oftentimes in early care and education, we talk about our environment as being our third teacher. It's how you set up your room. It's how you set up the shelves and how you organize your shelves, because then they know where to put things back, right? There has to be a place for things. But a safe and supportive environment also really focus again on emotional security and positive relationships. The next one over is about integrated learning experiences. This is when we talk about play-based learning, which is actually a very complex concept, not just concept, but way of thinking. It's the intersection of play, really brings together all the types of learning we talk about in the whole, as we think about holistic development, social skills and problem solving, and creativity, while being careful. And then every interaction counts. That's a critical thing that we talk about and that we try to do, that every interaction from the adult to the child, between the child to child, really matter. And it's in our routines, our meals, our transitions. You know, so it has to happen, you know, we kind of live within a natural, we want to have learning happen in a natural context. So wherever families are, that's where children are learning, wherever, wherever they are. And that's learning and interactions matter. The next 3 slides focus on a few more things about socio-emotional skills. We know that's always been important, but it's become even more important. The pandemic showed us that we have to continually build that into the way we work with children, how they learn about self-regulation and about conflict resolution. They're great, and they can manage that, but we have to teach them that. And about being emotionally intelligent. We want emotionally intelligent workers. It starts early. Starts when they're young.
And the pandemic really affected affected everyone. So when everybody got back to school, my colleagues at UHMC were like, yeah, their classrooms were silent. You know, they got these adults that hadn't interacted with people for 2 years. And it was a struggle to get them to start interacting with each other, to discuss in groups. Hopefully it's getting better, but it just really calls attention to the fact that we have to be intentional in this time of, you know, media, just overwhelming media. It's not only for the child, but for the educator. Uncle Matt outside was directing parking. So I started him and he said something that was so awesome. He said, you know, I give grace to them to the children, because if they don't get grace, where are they going to get it? I was like, that is profound.
Yeah, and
That
those
is
interactions, every interaction
Yes,
counts.
yeah, with Uncle Matt, the
Yeah.
parking guy, he is an awesome guy. So anyway, yeah, every interaction matters. And when you're educated, you know that. And we promote that.
And every interaction with the family matters.
Yes.
Right? Every child is part of that family. The families are really the true first teachers, and they're the ones that are going to have these children much longer than we do in early care and education. So it's critical for us to, for the field to really see that family engagement. So it's not just family involvement, really family engagement. So there's working side by side with you in developing curriculum, in, you know, meeting doing problem solving about what's going on. And so, yeah, it matters to partner with family. And with families, we also really have to think about language and culture. Certainly our own identities, our own social identities, but really the social identities of our families, and that matters. And so, so cultural relevant programs that value families' values, and sometimes what we think too about what might be developmentally appropriate might also be challenged by the family, because they might think that's just part of their culture. How do you separate that? So the kind of conversation you have to have with families is really around getting to that third space of negotiation about things like that. Okay, and then, of course, long-term, when you think about care and education that are deeply interconnected, we also think about long-term outcomes. Yes, it says better prepared for school. But we want to think about how that looks like in real life. And then also lifelong benefits. We know that that's the case. Brain science has really demonstrated that and shown that now for a few decades. And how do we demonstrate that? How do we use evidence-based practices to do that? Okay. So I know that was a lot on early care and education, but I thought it was important to share. Any thoughts, any reactions?
Terry, I think the long-term outcomes, the way that's phrased. So like, I think everyone would probably agree that what we're not trying to do is ensure every single kid is academically prepared for kindergarten. Like there's something about the model where there's a moment in time and that's the last moment you have. Which is a little bit like what we do with high school kids who are preparing for college, and if they don't get it, then they don't,
Yeah.
It's all very high stakes seeming and not developmental.
Yeah.
Right, so like on the whole, we expect long-term outcomes to be positive for their educational journey,
Yes,
but that might not be at the same pace for every single kid.
yeah,
And in aggregate, we're gonna see probably more kids ready by blank.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we panic when
yeah.
little Elaine's not ready
Yeah.
on a certain domain.
Right,
Yeah.
Right, it also doesn't mean we
Yeah.
say that domain doesn't matter,
right.
Yeah.
right, that's the other piece of it from my perspective, is like the academic readiness does matter, but. If we have a developmental approach, we know,
Yeah.
you're gonna get there, right,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
at some point.
So here's the paradigm shift. Instead of children ready for school, the schools have to be ready for our children.
Yeah.
And the
So,
range.
so
of
that's what,
children, right?
that's the vocabulary that we can start using, not children ready for school, but schools ready for that whole range of development and learning that all these children are gonna come in.
Yeah,
We had a Head Start on campus. We had children in foster care who come with multiple, sometimes, they've had trauma in their lives and would come with some behaviors. And, it took a lot of, and not only foster children, we had many children, lots of different behaviors. And it was always rewarding to help work with children to where they got to improve, and they were more emotionally stable. Yeah, it was rewarding.
Maybe a tangent off of that too is like, how do we also think about land and place as family?
Yes.
As a part of family, as like when I was thinking about family engagement and cultural relevance and our responsibility to incorporate not just like land, but this place.
Yes,
as-
space-based education, yes.
that's a really good
Yes.
point.
Thank you.
Because where we are, our place really matters as part of our identity.
Yes.
Right, so I think that is critical. I mean, if you all thought back about like, what do you consider home? In terms of a place, it brings to mind, I know sometimes I do this exercise with students, brings to mind a certain place. And that often is such a powerful place of where people connect with, And so, yeah, I think here in particular, I think we know how important Ina is and important to all of us. And so, yeah, that's critical as we think about our families and about our children. Any other thoughts, anyone else? No?
Just thinking of, based on what Steve was saying, that. I think it's Hashi Solberg, who's from Sweden, saying that in the Swedish education system, play is until about 7th grade even is the primary focus, no homework and. Well, and then they start doing the academic, I mean, they're learning all the ways
Yeah,
as that sort of different approach developmentally, that you're still giving the kids more time to figure out who they are.
yeah,
But that's the other basic myth that I was thinking, I was wondering whether it was gonna come up, was that play and learning are mutually exclusive.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
yeah.
Right, cause like it's goofy to put kids in for 3-year-olds in. Like doing worksheets and stuff like that, it's goofy.
Yeah.
But it's also not correct to think that they can't learn while playing.
Yeah,
And that you
Yes.
can't structure the kind of play that they're
Yes.
going to have, right? Like, I think
Yeah.
those are.
Yeah.
There's sort of like false dichotomies.
Yeah.
yes.
And I would say not just in the broader early ed and care community, but in Hawaii in particular, where there's been sort of like bogeyman, whatever. On both sides of
Yes.
that, you know,
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I actually think it's kind of one of those universal things that we have to address too. Yeah, children are learning and as they play, and now, and when you think about it, okay, so in working with principals, one of the things I discovered is, I don't know, see if you found this the case, but when I've worked with principals, if they have a science background and then they're going to elementary, they actually get the children are curious and exploratory and those kinds of things. They see it as children exploring and learning. And that's kind of what we have to do, is we have to think about, like, look at the child playing, but they're experimenting and exploring and using their curiosity and problem solving and all those things to kind of point out, you know, what are the things that they're actually doing that really keep them engaged in that kind of activity.
Well, it's sort of interesting in the context of like the pre-K to 12 education system. Like, I think one of the things to remember is there are different roles at different moments in the journey. And I always think about it like I'm a football fan. I'm not, obviously never been a football player, but I'm a football fan, and like everyone's got a very different role. So what you don't want to do is say, okay, we're doing academies in the high school, so let's do mini academies for the early education. Like that doesn't make any sense, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got a different role along the continuum, and we have to be sort of embracing the fact that you don't just mini me that which is
Yes.
the end result, right? But it can build to the success at the next level if it's done right?
So I think going back to what is the continuum that we're looking at, right? Of the trajectory of our children. And where we start. Cheryl?
Oh, sorry, just a comment also, but I think the biggest myth that we need to really stomp out is that parents have to know that schools or teachers are not their only teachers. Like you folks have been in the classroom. We can only do so much in our classrooms, but once they go home and completely erase everything, and then we're literally starting over, right? Every day or every Monday. So parents have to understand that that they're their first teachers.
Yeah.
That's the biggest.
Yeah, and the partnership with us, because sometimes
Partnering.
partnering with them, because they might not know exactly how they influence their own child too, and how impactful they are. Yeah, I think that's a really critical part, Cheryl. I think it's important for us to consider. So anyway, these are, slides. I mean, again, I gave you the handouts if you want to write notes on it. Feel free to do that, but these slides also will be available to you. Move on to the next. So this one kind of goes to another paper that we have in front of us. And this is an activity that you're going to do, but it's called Habits of a Systems Thinker. And this is, you'll see that on the screen. I love the fact that it's visual, but as we develop a system, as we think about ourselves and the systems principles we have, we also actually should reflect on what are habits as systems thinkers ourselves, our own habits. So I want you to take a few minutes to look at this, and what we're going to do, I'm just going to explain the activity we're going to do, is after you look at it for a while, I want you to select one that resonates with you, and you're going to be divided up into groups of 3 or 4. Let's see, this 3 of you. Okay, so 4 of you, so from Napua to Stephanie, and then Kawi to Dana, you're going to be in your group of 4, and then these 3 will be in the group, and then you're going to share with each other what resonated with you, and what, I think everybody will pick, hopefully, not, you pick whatever you want, but you're going to do that.
And the Water Center is a good resource for the systems thinking. This was something that came across at the quality incentive.
Improvements summit that we attended. Yes. Okay, so I'll give you a couple minutes to look at this, kind of see if there's just one that really connects, that you resonate with. whether it's something, whatever reason why you might resonate with that. And then in a couple minutes, I'll have you come together in your part with your team and then talk about it, why it resonated.
Yes.
Okay, so if you chose your one, then, yeah, maybe you guys could form, just make your chairs. Yeah.
Fine. The big picture of this.
For some.
How are you? Are you looking there?
Yeah, we can come there.
Okay. Mind if I stand? No.
All right, let's get stand and talk. If you wanna stand up, you can. Remember, stand or you can neck to the stand. You want to start. I think great city.
Structured and not. This is hard. You gotta go.
I know there's many to choose from. But you're gonna do all the. I think I like to communicate with you over email.
This is the good part of the time to get-
Well, and I've been thinking on like structure, like. But the stuff never. It's like, and then 4 million to and then that sounds all structured, and then I can overlay those structures and all policies to try to also. Like, for example. You know, the connections and then I.
It's all happening. Oh, yeah, exactly.
But it doesn't connect for.
I made that in Delta myself.
Yeah, my husband was really, really slow and I just have that. And then I just, oh gosh, yeah. That was just the other day. That was so good. It's not sure. It's just like. It's
Yeah, that's why I had a hard time like.
Sometimes I'm like a person. You see the big picture. Especially over time. Of course. It's not really. Oh, yeah.
The big picture. Oftentimes students, how does everybody? I couldn't get that. I was trying to slide and I can't remember what he said.
And then I landed on it. It's like, I don't know. What I strive for is understanding. And then thinking like, everybody else on the like, sometimes I. I guess I'm not. I think it's the same, or you're like, oh my God. And like, sometimes it's just one little thing you say, like one person, you know, I think it's like the high leverage, you're like, how did that happen? Right, so that's why I like, that's why sometimes I say stuff out loud, like, maybe nobody thought. Right, you know what I mean, sometimes it's the way you go down, it's not, sometimes it actually, like, move stuff in a direction that you think. Or make that more, right? Yes.
It worked, yeah. Right.
It was.
And then there's also. I'm thinking of this, like, even different iterations of the systems.
Yeah, these past few months. Because we're establishing.
I was thinking of more about it, so long, the work next to each other. And it's that.
It's,
And then. And then I think about the kind of.
whether or not they.
And I realized, I know that.
We're like, there's not much time coming. Yeah,
Yeah, all of you learning and everything. No, my husband. Every decision. Last But like his experience, the public information system, created, that's what you're supposed to learn. To me, then like the city, yeah. When you go to school, like.
Where are we doing? Are we all about it here?
It's really stressed out.
Everything else.
But there's something about that, like how she's gonna be like exalted, like this bond, like, you know.
Like all wrong.
It's exciting, like I think that's, this is where I push back, like. Too much push to say, no, not.
Because 60 years.
I mean, we want the like, this was a really good.
This is how.
Together.
Yeah, I'm gonna give you 1 minute. Oh, I don't know. How many have not shared yet?
Not even running.
How many have?
An idea of what they might. There's also like some excellent ways to play for learning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just 1 more minute and then if you could get back.
Yeah. Pop in something.
To the individual. To the individual. To you. Right. They're thinking about what the influence is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Experiential learning.
Actually, it was the.
Hey, I know you're. Sorry.
Not certain.
Yeah, go ahead. You say it's all.
You're alive. But because it's a position, you understand.
So that you become your own private college. My kids are super nice. I'm doing a lot of ROI calculations right now.
What I took my kids, they're going to college. And then
We've had this people on this day, so we want to go down there. And then,
Because they didn't know exactly.
Easy, yeah.
About the children, I mean, about the people, to be very, there's one there. If you stay, if you want to stay, you can go somewhere else.
Yeah,
Is understanding that the importance is taking care of all the children, right, for.
I love it. It's the head of the side, and then it's all sort of about
Which is how we run it.
getting people to.
Excellent.
Okay, I think time's up.
I didn't get my kids to put on. I didn't get my kids to whatever.
If you folks need to go to the restroom, do that now.
Yeah.
I think there's, no, there aren't.
It's right around the corner.
So there's two, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit like that.
And I can go that. And so. Where's your program, right? Now make all because where's the screens?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like K-12 or high school. Because we're pre-K to 12.
Yeah.
I do think it's different to where you are. Every town is super different. And the one side it's more about like. How are you gonna get it? 'Cause there's a million kids.
No, that's why I was.
And then North Shore has a fewer.
You're telling me that. Yeah. I said childcare.
It's not, I think the part was the. Okay, you folks can,
That here, right?
It's
So.
so changes.
Yeah.
More kids go to.
Their minds, they scare legislators into.
They just don't like.
Oh, yeah. We still comes back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we're here.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
But you got a lot.
And then, but I.
Right? Exactly.
What do you do? Yeah.
We've been doing it.
That's dogs. I'll take
Our kids. They gotta use it.
In last place. But still that it's this.
Yeah. There was a private, but there was like a private side. There was a cabinet.
And they're like. They're so good.
You're like.
I was like, I'm not gonna be that mom, and then I realized that there are such limited choices. And I was like, hey, we can go somewhere, oh, like, you can stay away there. You look at that.
They seem.
They're happy when they go to school.
Okay, now that Phil's coming back, if you guys could just sit down. Yeah, and in a few minutes, we're actually taking a visual break. Yeah, but again, feel free to go to the, it's right around the corner. People still know about it. Okay, so, not, maybe not for everyone, because you have other things to talk about, but how was that, that experience kind of selecting one of these habits and then having a conversation about it with other people? Anybody want to share?
I think the process of selecting just one was hard.
Yeah.
That was the hardest part.
Yeah.
And then it was interesting hearing everyone's perspective of what they chose, because I could see a connection, like, yeah, I understand like that resonates with me as well.
Yeah, no, it's hard to choose one. As Elaine said, this also comes with a set of cards. I mean, you can play, use it with your teams and so forth. So, anybody else want to share about your experience with that?
Or you can play fair, she picked 3.
Outside the box.
Choices are important just in case.
Yeah.
Rainbow.
That's good, that's good. And yeah, so they all are good habits and we all want to strive. How we think about that. It's a good way to kind of check our own. habits. How we-
I want to share. I wasn't going to, because I'm like, this gets me fired up. I'm sorry.
Good.
I'm not going to yell,
Yeah.
but changing mindsets and perspectives is so important
It's so,
for every single one. And I guess for me, like I come from a communications background
yes,
and also a lobbying background. So I saw how much it took to change perspectives when the mindsets were changed about early learning. Well, a little as it
Yes.
related to Act 46. I
yes.
guess.
Act 46.
But when mindsets were able to like get jolted, because I was kidding. And they would start to think about all of these things, about the impact on our economy, about the impact on society, about the impact on how every individual in Hawaii will contribute to society versus take from society. Anyway, I can go all about it, but
That's great,
perspectives.
Howie. No, but you know, Howie, I appreciate you saying that because, you guys all have seen like that iceberg kind of picture where the top of the iceberg you can see, and then the bottom, which is really bigger, you cannot see. The mindsets are on the bottom, underneath the surface. Right, and as Howie mentioned, you know, when you start changing mindsets, that begins to create real change.
Because funding creates change too, that's.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
change mindsets, like
Yeah.
then we can focus on what is the priority. When
Right.
we nurture the children first,
Yes.
when we nurture the children first, society becomes so much better.
Yeah.
And it helps everyone. It helps the economy, it
Yes.
helps the prison system,
Yes.
it helps everyone.
Yeah.
It helps welfare. I'm sorry.
No, so and that
These
is
are the kinds
something,
of things I was
No, but-
yelling and saying.
but Kelly, I think that's so important because first of all, and good that you have a communication background, because we have to be able to communicate that with different audiences. Sometimes they're not quite ready, so you have to try another phrase or whatever. And sometimes we have too much language, right? We have to kind of unpack our own language in order to get to the heart of what we were trying to get to. So how do we do like, you know, an elevator speech on some of the things we're trying to get across and to whom? Yeah, I think that's important. So I think that was the reason why this whole thing was put together, was that it also means to build those habits, you know, how are we changing our mindsets? How are we making these kinds of things happen for ourselves and others? Okay. This next principle I want to kind of focus on, it's becoming a lot more evident, even though we've known about it. But, and this is called lived experiences and human-centric design. Both of these really are important in this work that we're doing. Because of the people that are both using, are really the contributors to what we're creating. So for instance, we know that we want to focus on children. We want to focus on our keiki and their ohana. We have to know and think about their lived experiences. We also want to focus on the workforce and really understand their lived experiences and look at them from all of those from a human-centered design, meaning that their voices matter and how we collect that information really matter. So lived experiences, as you can see on the next slide, talks about how the lived experiences of the people on whom a social issue or combination of social issues has had a direct impact. Right? Lived experiences includes their experiences, their lived experiences. And human-centric design, which has been kind of the last few years, has been kind of a a new thing that social circles or social sciences are looking at now, education, is an approach that allows government agencies to identify root causes of key problems and ensure improvements to service delivery of products are driven by the needs of the people who use them. Human-centered design incorporates human experience into all stages of the problem-solving and improvement process. Human-centered design ensures the people who are most affected remain at the center of any improvement planning. And they really are the people. The ones in the center are really the ones with solutions. I think we have to pay attention to that. That should be part of how we problem solve too. It's not by ourselves. It really is people outside of this, outside of the room, in our communities. And how do we get that kind of information? Feedback, a variety of different ways. Talk story, basically. You're talking story with people and getting them to hear from you as board members. And you could do it in a systemic way by, putting together some kind of format. Surveys, focus groups, getting advice from others. And so anyway, this is just a way that feedback from the user is critical. Having them part of our conversations is critical. All of you have different roles, and also you have had different, you also have different identities. So if you have been a parent of a young child, that matters to the kind of discussion that we're having. Or a grandparent, your grandparent of young children. So you live in your community. So our lived experiences and our own ourselves as humans are important to this, but we also have to think about outside of the board.
It's a cycle because with systems thinking, try it, go back, did that work? And keep going. It's not, oh, we checked in with them, so it's okay. It is continual cycle of feedback.
Yeah, one of the things I want to emphasize that I think we all have been involved in planning, making plans. And we certainly have a state plan. We have these strategic implementation plans. And they're good to have, but we need to use them and not have them sit on a shelf. And, we've been participating in all that. So we have to, part of this is really going back to the users and have we met those kinds of goals that we thought we would, we thought we would meet, and how do we get feedback around that? So some of the questions, and these kind of questions actually came up when Elaine, myself, Selma, Dana, and Ian went to that Quality Improvement Summit. So some of these questions actually came up, and this was a slide on one of the workshops that Dana and I went to. But some of these questions were with reference to quality improvement system, or with right now we're looking at that with a continuous quality improvement system. But yeah, how often and it could apply to anything. How often do you obtain public and provider feedback? What drives the changes and revisions? What proportion relates to budgets, regulatory requirements, child development goals, public feedback, child care provider feedback? And this was, again, specific to improve the quality. How do you use this information to make system changes or revisions? And how do you connect public and provider feedback to system level changes to make sure system change is based on human-centered design? So as Elaine said, it's kind of this feedback we're all going to get or could get. Any questions about this lived experiences and human-centered
I think I
design?
remember visiting a couple of schools. DOE has sort of a standard way of building schools, and often when a new development is housing developments being built, the developer has to build the schools too. But at least in two different occasions, they use that, I think it's called a charrette.
Yeah.
And let the teachers involved. Both of those schools are so different. Like classrooms have a door to a hallway and a door to the yard. In every classroom and things like that. And so when you go to one, it's just such a different experience. Because they let the teachers design the spaces as opposed to let the developer design.
Yeah. Might have been involved in some of that. It's a good example.
I think as a board, we have to think about what's the funding needed to get this feedback and the mechanisms that we need to put this into practice. So something to think about.
So like our last, I'm sorry, no, go ahead. Our last conversation, our last meeting. Before Alohi was talking about the parent council, is it about the parent council? So that would be a. How's that coming along?
I don't picture.
Yeah. And we're having that list.
Yeah, getting feedback from families.
Yeah, we're working, we're still working on that and figuring out if there's something already in place in the community that could serve as that kind of feedback loop, or is it something different? Yeah, so not wanting to duplicate what might already be happening in the community. So again, that collaboration piece, so we're still working.
Stephanie, you had a comment?
I was gonna ask about that too, like I think in general, families and communities are asked what they think a lot of times from a lot of places.
Yeah.
And it's important, and so how do we find what vehicles might already exist and to maximize these other, and then meet people where they're at, like our
Yes.
meetings aren't particularly accessible for families.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
And for the voices of the kiddos who are in this system, right? So how do we could make it accessible?
Wanda?
I was just kind of gonna echo on that and not necessarily going back to, what funding we need, but what systems are already in place that we can join and either, whether it's, or even relationship building to get some of that feedback, kind of like as a more of a talk story of like, oh, how are you doing? How is the program? Versus necessarily like a.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, the way the Early Learning Board has now been reconfigured with geographic areas. So I think about how important that is, to hear from our accountants, to listen, because really the relationships are really at the neighborhood level, the county level. And so I think that's key also, that how we structure these and be able to have a board and also be listening and talking story and getting feedback, what issues are come up. That would be really helpful.
Can I just add that the sort of the intention of what's here in terms of lived experiences and human-centered design can be applied not only from, like, in terms of the board getting feedback from external entities, but also in terms of the way the board interacts with itself internally. Like, I think there's a little bit of that missing, where I think that happens with a lot of boards, that if we really truly want to dig into something, we have to build in time.
Yes.
Not just on
Yes.
any individual agenda, but you got to figure out, like, how long are we going to talk about this before we get to action?
Yeah.
Sometimes it felt like
Yeah.
slow and then super fast.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
just for
Yeah.
decisions, or slow and then nothing happens.
Yeah.
But like, so I feel like there's some work for us to do to implement this among ourselves, in addition to
Yeah.
Yes.
externally.
Yeah, so part of it today is we're gonna be talking about that very thing, Steve. And the other part is, it's hard to do it within the structure of the meeting itself, so having actually opportunities like this where we can really have a little bit more thoughtful engagement over some of these issues is helpful. So that's good. Okay, so basically, we're gonna stop here, take a break. And, get some refreshments. We'll do maybe. Let's see. I don't know, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. Doing good, you guys. We're on target. I'm going to cut off the. discussion.
Beanie Weenies, like
Beanie Weenies.
canned baked beans
Oh.
and hot dogs. from Salem.
Okay, we are going to move forward on talking about the overview of our system. Just some parts of it, again, critical components, but maybe a little bit more in particular areas. So, I thought it'd be interesting for us to kind of consider what is the history of early childhood education in our state? So, my friend ChatGPT. So I was able to like Google this and be able to add some other things to it. So when you think about the early influences, before missionary, families were already, taking care of their children, educating them through family community practices, cultural teachings, language skills. And then during the missionary time, it was also when some of the schools began to be established, those early schools, that kind of focus on basic literacy and moral education. And KCAA was founded in 1895. So it was, anyway, the acronym, actually, there was an F before it because it was a free kindergarten. And if you talk to Dr. Al Castle, he'll tell you all about the history related to his grandmother, or his great
So,
grandmother. Anyway, and here's a whole paper that's written on it. But also, if you look at the KCAA website, you can see a little bit about the history and a picture, I think, of her great grandmother. But that was interesting, to know about because there was not kindergarten programs before. So they started them, and then eventually kindergarten got connected to the public school. And then so the preschool started to happen. And of course, that's what we talk about. The next one is the early preschool programs, which kind of emerged. Also connected to Dr. Castle was that his great grandmother had a partnership at this Chicago Lab School with Dr. John Dewey, who was progressive education. And so that he was brought here to Hawaii. There started some progressive education movement. So that's kind of the history also when you think about Hanaha'oli School. They come from a progressive education foundation. And anyway, so they began to, at the early preschools, were then adding more of the emphasis on play and social interaction and nurturing. Then the expansion in the mid-20s after World War II, there was really a growing recognition. That point, if you folks, think about World War II, that's where a lot of the women who were at home went back to work because their husbands were away. And so when it changed, many of them were already in kind of positions and jobs. And so this more preschool programs actually came up, run now by community organizations and churches. A lot of churches in our state started as they still do, but as a service to the community. And then Head Start started in 1965 federally, at the federal level. And that was really an emphasis then on low-income children and creating comprehensive services that were free. Yeah. And our own Hawaiian language immersion program, preschools, started in the 80s and 90s to revitalize language and culture. And we're, that's a really important part of our own history and identity and preserving and celebrating our identity. And then more modern times is like around our times is really, when I say our, I think, I better put it in context because I've been around for a long time. Because one of my first jobs was actually at a Head Start Center in Washington, DC in the 70s. So when I say our, I meant like collective our. So then there, Montessori, which has been actually was around for a long time. There were more Montessori schools, Reggio Emilia approaches, which we don't have too many in Hawaii, but if you visit Midpac, they have a Reggio Emilia approach. I had the fortune of visiting Reggio Emilia and their infant toddler programs in the 80s, no, 2003 or something like that. Fascinating and all basically free. Free for the community, for the Reggio Emilia city. And here we are in our current landscape, which is a lot more recognition and more investments. The importance of seeing how quality early education and care and education have long-term success and impact. And as we look across our nation, we are seeing more and more of that investment happening. And so when Elaine and I first started off, there was no set, we didn't even think about ourselves this way, but we're already activists in the early care and education space. And, going to the Capitol, talking to legislators way back when, and that there is this whole activism kind of, history in
Getting the Maui County Early Childhood position.
Yeah, it took us
First in the country.
Yeah,
first in the
and we
state.
took us 12 years to get
Yes.
that. But we get to every county council member and then of course they change and you have to go back again, So it took us a long time and so that was important. And now we hope we can really secure more funding that we can.
So Terry was the first full-time Maui County Early Childhood Coordinator in that position. She was also the first executive director of EOEL when it was still in Governor Abercrombie's office. So it hadn't yet been able to spin off. So she's been in, and then she was at Kamehameha Schools before that for a while. So, she's been in all these spaces to be able to give this really big picture view of
The other thing that both Elaine and I have done not concurrently, but we've also done some work nationally. So Elaine was on the NAYC governing board for a number of years. And then I was working for a little while in the National Head Start office. And was a fellow. That 1 year I was a fellow. I was still trying to do work with them after that fellowship year. That was in 2000. Before I went to Kamehameha Schools. The story about me and Kamehameha Schools is I was heading out of DC and I was on the phone with DJ Mailer. She's interviewing me and I'm in the car trying to get to the airport. And so it was pretty funny because, well, I thought it was funny, but I had to tell her, I'm sorry, I have to hurry up because I gotta catch my plane. And then when I got home, then it was like I had a second interview or something. I had like several interviews. That's where I met Napua. It was a wonderful time. I wanted to actually stay with Kamehameha Schools, but when the governor asked me, I thought, I guess I can't say no to the governor. So anyway. Okay, so now one of the things we want to consider is how we think about practice and how the profession is. So next several slides is really around the profession and NAYC was started in 1926, around there. And then, so one of the things that NAYC has done, it is the largest professional association for early care and education practitioners, professionals, has really put together position statements and documents that have guided the field. So you can see this one, these are the ones that there's been some editing on the code of ethics have been around for a long time. And there's a real close connection to Hawaii and the code of ethics because Dr. Stephanie Feeney, who was at the College of Education for many years, wrote the first book. Yes, yeah. And a philosophy professor, Ken, at university wrote that first document of code of ethics, ethical conduct. But one of the emphasis that has really happened in the last few years has really been two things. One about really identifying these standards and competencies for early childhood educators, even though we kind of knew that and it's been documented, and there's been a real emphasis on equity. So advancing equity in programs and in the policies that we provide, that help guide us. So part to the profession is also, heard you talk about it a little bit to the board, but it came out and it was through a consensus building process that was coordinated by a task force on the national level. About 15 national organizations were able to come together, begin to look at how do we, even though we think we are professionals, maybe not the whole world thinks that, and we also have ways to improve it. So taking from the science, the healthcare field, it looked at modeling some of the work that, our healthcare field has done, brought that. So the task force began to look at some of the components. So you see some of the key recommendations. And this came out in 2020, right? I think in March when we had the pandemic and shut down. And have been working the last few years on intentionally doing some of this work. And some of you who were at the symposium, we talked about this too. So I just want to help you share this one video that came out from the national. Let's see if I can. I think I have to put my volume. I think there's a way to. Sorry, guys. I think there's a way to click off that wall. Then maybe I need some help from you. Like this. There's like a button.
Oh, there's no other way. Oh, okay. People will hear it, and if you don't, that's me talking. Do you have the link to this video? No.
We'll look at it during lunch. Yeah, I'll send it to Kevin because I think the link.
Just drop it in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll get it later, Kevin. Okay, yeah, we'll get it later. We'll get back to that, and I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling.
But it's a short one, but I want to move on to the next one, which actually, so the part to profession looked at the entire field. But the focus, the priority is really at the top of this circle. So the field, early childhood field, includes like mental health consultants, children's librarians, pediatricians, home visitors. And this is according to that task force and others. And then, but the top of the circle is what this, right now, there's a priority on these three circles, which is the center is early childhood educators, and on the side are pedagogical and instructional administrators. And on the other side is professional preparation faculty and trainers. So higher ed, instructional administrators, and then early childhood educators themselves. And I have to say that I know sometimes we use the term that these educators are in centers, but this is really meant for the field. So you could be operating out of your home. It doesn't have to be, it can be all settings. So that's one of the things we want to look at.
And so the unifying framework is focused on those top three circles. But the board, our board, is really looking at the whole circle. It kind of encompasses a lot of the other parts, not only the
Yes,
early childhood
yes.
educators. So
Yeah.
we kind of have a broader scope than the unifying profession,
Right.
which is an important move and movement, but we have a bigger.
Yes.
Program.
Yeah, I think that's a really important distinction. And also that sometimes as we do the planning, we have to prioritize certain things. We can't do it all. So it's how some of these movements or national initiatives can really help guide us too. And so that's one of the things. So what I want to say is, so the professional early care and early childhood education professionals, we want it to be a distinct, or it is a distinct profession within the field, following some standards. So you can see these standards. I don't have to read it all, but so what we've done in higher education the last 2 years has been align all of our courses, both at the community college and at the university and college of ed anyway, align all of our courses, existing courses and new courses to these standards and competencies. Not that we weren't doing that, but this really gave us opportunity to kind of talk about it and really, especially because we're talking about a cross system. So what's going on with the community college as our folks move up, or move through the pathway, we want to begin to scaffold, their learning. So that's been an important part of the work that I've been doing after the university's doing this coordination work among the university and community colleges. Yeah, so this is a document. What I showed you was just standards. And then in this document, they've also looked at these 3 levels of expertise, entry level. So you're thinking about the pathway, the entry level, which could be a credential, at least 120 hours. So it's up to, it also recognizes a child development associate, which is a national credential. And then the associate's degree, the bachelor's degree, and some of the bachelor's degrees also include an initial license, a teacher license. If you're working in the DOE, oftentimes it's just a pre-K or pre-K to 3rd or pre-K to kindergarten license. And there is now a National Commission of Professional Excellence in Early Childhood Education. So the task force did their work and then they moved things over to this commission. That's more of a permanent commission. So every state is really trying to move forward on some of these recommendations. That's just one area. So when we think about where our children are, we do want to think about, so I spent time talking a little bit about the preparation side. We also want to think about access side. So our mixed delivery system is something that we have been thinking about. It's been in place for a long time. But now you're hearing more people talk about it. You listen to Lieutenant Governor just talking about his delivery system and using looking at public as well as community-based programs. So we created a document.
You have a handout in your packet called Mixed Delivery in Hawaii. And then there's a link on there to the EOL page because there's a page on the website that has a variety of these programs, but I kind of wanted to organize it in a way that lets you see what we as a board will need to deal with or be aware of as we develop policy. I'm not sure. Yeah, it's a separate. Yeah. So
does everybody have it? It's just a landscape.
yeah, it's a landscape.
Urban care and education
Yeah.
organizations 2024.
So the way I organized it was like type of setting. If you hear us talk about, or you hear hear early childhood educators talk about settings, okay, so there are different kinds of settings. So there's center-based, school-based, special education, family childcare, FCIL, family child interaction learning, home visiting, early Head Start, family friend neighbor care, or licensed exempt care. So all those types of settings. So I just want you to be familiar, if you're not already, with these terms. And then it goes into the ages that are served. And then the description and hours. So most of our children 3 to 5 are served in center-based, community-based programs, which also includes Leo, Hawaiian immersion programs, also includes Head Start, early Head Start. But I kind of separated the Head Start, early Head Start because of the funding stream. And then there's the funding sources. So that's something that we need to be very aware of, and we, Kamehameha Schools is a huge player and has been a huge player and funder of initiatives in early childhood for decades, really. And has been behind the scenes really working to move things forward by funding things like, I think they funded the initial Child Development Coalition, and then Hawaii Careers with Young Children was funded by KS for a while. And so they've been behind a lot. So, mahalo nui to Kamehameha. And then you see the oversight column. So the oversight means, whether they have to be licensed for THS. And here's an interesting thing. You're going to hear licensed programs. You're going to hear about in the DOE, teachers have a license. Okay, so those are two different things. So in the DOE, the teachers have to have a license approved. They have to go through the Hawaii Teacher Standards Board. In the community-based programs, the program as a whole is licensed by Child Care Program Office, DHS rules. And they have different rules for different kinds of, they have group childcare homes and group childcare centers, which includes group childcare homes, which are family childcare homes with 7 to 12 children. And they can have, they have to have at least 2 staff with the 7 to 12 children. And then within the family childcare home, if the children are very young, they're limited in the number, that caregiver is limited to in the number of children they can have. So we have all these complexities and nuances. So as a board, though, I think you need to know what, and keep asking questions. Because again, the thing about this new board is that you are the public. You're kind of the face of the public. So when you ask questions, it helps us, those of us who have been in the field, whatever, kind of be able to go, okay, we gotta address that. We gotta make that understandable to everybody. So please ask questions. If something doesn't make sense, or whatever, just ask questions. And if we can answer or look for the answer, okay? But your questions, I think, and your comments are really crucial. So, so we have multiple funding streams in early education. So the ones the funds that go to DHS from the federal government, Child Care Development Fund, there's also CCDF/CCDBG. You have another handout that has acronyms. So I just gave that to you kind of as a reference, in case you hear these things and what the heck? Because I remember going to the college and what the heck? What are people talking about? But so it's kind of an overview of what we have. Multiple funding streams. We want to make sure that we do not supplant funding. We want to have federal funding continue to come in. State is putting a lot more money in. And the federal funding goes to the families at this point. Right now, I think DHS is gonna pilot the contracts, right, for infant toddler centers, or is that a PDG? I forget. Who is,
Yeah, we're piloting to PDG, but DHS is looking into that too.
okay, so right now, the funds go to the family, so they can choose where they want to put their child. But the model that is being looked at that is different, and it'll be in addition to going to the family, is contracting a classroom. So say Lieutenant Governor, maybe Reddy Keiki needs to have a classroom. There's no space in the public school there, but here's a program, an early childhood community program. And enough, however it works, they're gonna contract that whole classroom. And so the funds will go to that program instead of the family. It'll be free to that family. Okay, so it's a different way of using the federal funds this has happened in other states too. So now, it takes a while for our complex systems. We're a system of systems. So these systems have to work within their rules, change rules, adapt, and it's a process. But these multiple ways of looking at the funding, it's happening. So as a board, I think we need to be aware of that, okay? Community schools, like your preschools, charge just kind of a small tuition, yeah? It's kind of a nominal tuition. Head Start is free to families. Reddy Keiki programs are free to families. The challenge with in the community programs is the funding or the tuition that is charged is not enough to fund the full cost of what the staff. If they were gonna charge enough to pay the staff an equitable wage, the tuition would be even higher than it is. You wanted to say something, Joanna?
Because you had said Ready Keiki programs are free to families, but that's not necessarily.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Because Ready Keiki supports mixed delivery systems, so if it
Yeah,
is like
that's right. Thank
expanding
you.
POD to go to a
Yes,
DHS
thank you.
licensed classroom,
Yeah.
that
That's right.
parents do pay for so I don't want that
Yes,
to be
thank
like
you. No, thank
a-
you.
a misunderstanding
Please,
with
yes,
that.
thank you.
And then I would just add to this, like, this is fantastic, because I think it's a really great oversight, but there are private subsidies also available for families that, so such as
Good
like
point.
the Pohikiki Scholars or
Right,
Kikyo Kaina Help or
right.
some of those other
Okay,
ones.
so we can keep adding to this,
Yeah.
just kind of a first shot at trying to give us an overview of what we need to know to continue our work. So thank you. And
Yeah.
please,
Yeah.
I appreciate.
I do want to, thank you, Alana. I do want to say that when we talk about mixed delivery system, it really is giving families options.
Yeah.
And so we on our end, because we want to make it affordable for families and we want to make it accessible. It's on our end as decision makers and working with our policymakers to do the back end support of financing and all the other stuff. But the purpose of the mixed delivery system is options for families. So in a mixed delivery system, there is a variety of different settings. So that's kind of what Elaine was putting in, emphasizing here too.
And so, when we talked in the beginning, when Terry showed, it's about the children and the families. And then when I was having individual conversations with board members, Stephanie asked me, so what is your vision? So here's my vision, is that in the future, parents, families will go, oh, I need one program for my young child. I'm gonna go to this app. Maybe it's Patch, maybe it's Julia, I don't know. There's gonna be an app that they can plug in what they're looking for. It'll give them some basic options. They plug in the information, where they're looking for it, the income if they're, and then what will pop up is, oh, here's what's available in where you're looking. There's family childcare home that has openings. Here's a classroom, here's a community program that has extended hours. Here's infant toddler care, and they'll have it, right? To make that happen though, all these multiple systems, we have so much work to do to coordinate the systems. So that's kind of where, that's my hope for the future. But to get there, it's gonna take a lot of work coordinating, communicating, collaborating with these multiple systems. And when you think about the center-based community programs, each one is another system, right? KCAA, here we are. Kindergarten Children Aid Association, right? And they have multiple sites, but then we have, like Cheryl has, you have one site or and so, we have all these different, it's a complex picture. So, again, your questions, your comments, your corrections, very much needed and welcome.
The one that I know that we can add to this too,
Yeah.
but the other one that's kind of sitting outside of this is the military too. Because they currently don't have capacity in their current century, so a lot of them funnel into the community, but they're gonna be building those 2 huge capacity spaces. And then additionally, there is that new rule that just passed that they can operate sites off of federal property, but it's not gonna fall under DHS. So trying to somehow, and so I haven't yet found out who's the holder of that information, but that's another thing that's gonna be running outside of DHS.
Alana.
I really like the idea of possibly additions to this list, because I think just knowing like and understanding what's out there and then the funding sources. Because the only other, like a couple that I thought would be helpful too would be having like infant toddlers, so like IT. And then as well as early intervention.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah, so we have to think about both the range of, ages we're trying to serve and how the community. And so that's why I think having county reps, right, in our early learning board can be so helpful, because there's actually some kind of county resources that's going into sometimes the gap, like gap subsidies might be coming up.
Yeah.
I know in Maui County, there's a gap subsidy, fills up where the state doesn't fill it.
I think we are also prenatal. So 5, so there's
Good
that
point.
whole
Yes, that is a
range
good
of
point.
Yeah, there's a
prenatal
whole,
and then
yeah.
like
So what I'll
parenting
do
support.
is I'll share this with the board with editing rights, so everybody can add to it. Because, again, this was just my first step. It was never meant to be the all to end all, but at least, so with our collective knowledge, we can
Thanks
add
for
to
putting
it.
it
Yeah,
together.
this is so helpful.
This would be-
I wanna make it an infographic.
I would.
Yeah.
That's what I
Oh,
think, just,
okay.
like,
I have
this
no
is the
idea.
information like families should have.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
so
that's what I was
like,
thinking
like
about
sub
too.
categorize, like, this is the
Right.
prenatal resources,
Like
this is the
before
birth
the
to
app
2.
comes out?
Yeah.
The prenatal support,
It could help be like the wireframe.
Yeah.
And that's one way to get people to the EOEL website.
Yeah.
right? Another way, excuse me.
Yeah, I really like that
Yeah.
idea.
Great idea.
There is, and I noticed on the UL website, there is this document about low cost
Yeah.
programs. So I think this is a really good way to continue to add to that. And I think Elaine mentioned that let's have a shared drive too. The board has a shared.
Yeah,
drive.
we have a shared drive. I don't know how many of you have access to it. You have some people have. Yeah.
Does
I could get
Kevin,
in.
though, I believe Kevin, did you share the board credentials, the Google Drive for the board with all the new board members? When they just came on a while ago?
He did.
So. He did.
But-
Yeah.
Could you try to resend that, please?
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is it. I think I got the link or something, but I didn't know how to access it.
Yeah, you gotta put in a password.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
So it's like one drive, it's like a single user, but we're all members.
To
of
Google
that.
Drive, that everybody
Yeah.
has the same login credentials,
Yeah.
same
Mm,
email,
yeah.
same password.
Yeah,
Okay, so you have to like actually log in and then you get the folder.
yeah, so
Okay.
like
Perfect.
and you gotta do it in a different browser from what you usually, like I usually use Safari and then I put it in, use Chrome, because otherwise your normal browser is gonna pop up whatever you usually use. So, so the other, was the acronym document, and I know I made another one, I forget.
Yeah.
now.
You did one else. Acronyms, and then also there's one on,
Oh,
organizations.
yeah, the different
Yeah.
organizations in the state, so
Okay.
just, kind of categorized by,
Yeah, into like state agencies,
Yeah.
nonprofits, coalitions, national groups. Yeah. so
Right.
It's a
So,
beginning list.
again, it's not a exhaustive list. And I don't know if we want to make it exhaustive for that one, but I will share it with everybody so that everybody can, access it.
Yeah.
So maybe what we can do on the shared drive is maybe we should make a folder for, anyway, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But, Yeah, I'll work with Kevin, he's the master. Any comments on that?
We already started to talk about financing, and just want to point out, there's this report that came out in 2018, so it's been around for a while. But it talks about transforming the financing of early
Yeah.
care and education, and it begins to really look at it in terms of what Elaine mentioned, is that what is the full or true cost of what we want for, in terms of we want services for children and families, young children and families. What is the true cost going to look like? And so it has to be really, we get a variety of different funding. So when you look at this funnel, it has, there's parents who pay. There's also the federal government, local state, there's, let's see, other philanthropy and businesses can also be participating in this. And then what we want to be able to do is really think, there are ways to get to estimated full cost and, or true cost. Now they're calling it true cost. Well, years ago, we used to call it full cost. But one of the things about when you look at our whole system, it is really in our childcare side where parents are paying for childcare, where the cost is not adequate. Right, so it's the staff who are subsidizing that cost. So they're being paid at a certain level, a certain wage. And so therefore, that's it's not the only way the struggles that our system one of the ways our system is struggling, but it is a key way because we need the workforce in order to deliver the services. So, so one of the things that my project did when we first started was we contracted Rand Corporation, which many of you know about that. Contracted Rand Corporation to do a study on our wages, benefits, and working conditions in our DHS licensed programs, licensed and regulated programs, so centers and homes. And so the RAND study is available to any of you. We've also done some briefs on it. That RAND study has a roadmap, and that roadmap is actually something that, so after the study came out, I've been convening a compensation design team. And from that compensation design team, we've been also working with advocacy organizations and other partners when it comes to legislation. So the last few years, we've been really pushing a wage supplement and bonus bill. Every year it gets a little closer, but we have not been able to fund that yet. And part of our concern has been that during the pandemic, of course, childcare has been seen as essential, and there are federal dollars that came through DHS, as wage supplements, as bonuses, but that's ended. And so and again, I don't want to say that compensation is the only, I don't say wages is the only thing, benefits really matter too. But the other thing is working conditions. It could be where even, sometimes I hear from the workforce and they're saying, if only I'm heard in my program, I would love to stay, but I'm not, my voice doesn't matter. So those kinds of things are really important too, right? It's not just, it's a relationship, because we're such a relationship-based kind of field, relationships matter. And so, but I really want to commend DHS for the federal dollars that went out to our programs, and some of it was for mental health use as well. And I heard from some of our providers saying, they didn't know what to do with that money. I said, well, you can go buy shoes and go, so you can go running, or you could go, set up an appointment with a therapist. You could do all those things, but it was kind of like, oh, I don't know what to do now. I have this little extra money for my own mental health. Yeah. So we do have to take care of our people, and but this one way is really showing. So there are states that are actually moving further in compensation, and leading the way. And it is a collaborative effort, a coalition building effort between the provider, the educators, their employers, businesses, families, everybody really to get behind it. So anyway, so this document is a report that's been out there. I also want to just say that this also slide is another way of thinking about financing, from public to private to grants and scholarships, tax incentives, innovative financing models, and then some of the challenges in financing, because there are also inequities in financing, and also the importance of sustainability. How do we do that? So we, as a country, believe that K-12 is public good. We don't yet believe that younger than that, or now pre-K is happening, but we look at this, starting from birth, there should be opportunities for our children, or care for our children. And it has to be families' choices too. So I think it's a hard one when we talk about public good, but also we want choices. Yeah, that's just how we have to think about this. So just want to point these out. Okay. Yeah, okay. So this last, or not last, but this section is, what does it mean to make policy recommendations to improve our system of systems? So this is where we want to talk about, like, what is a policy? So if we're, as a board, you're coordinating, your role is to coordinate the system, make policy recommendations to improve the system, and then oversee EOEL. What are potential policies? So we go back, of course, to our guiding principles, both the board, we talked about that earlier. These are our guiding principles. These 7 guiding principles. And then we also think about that whole systems principles that we talked about earlier, keeping that in mind, lived experiences and why that's important, and human-centered design as a problem-solving, both of these as problem-solving strategies. That's okay, so so this is kind of a brainstorming activity, but I just wanted to give you a couple of examples. But I do want to say that in your packet, there is our only policy, the only policy that the board has developed, and it is policy 1-101. That's a good start to 1-101. It relates to, it's just a single sheet, this. And there was a time when we had, a couple of years ago, I think now, we had a workforce subcommittee, workforce development subcommittee. So this came out of that subcommittee. It was chaired by Justina Cross. And so the policy is on-track development, care, and learning. Let's remove this, but every KK beginning of birth has the opportunity to benefit from high-quality education, early childhood education, delivered by well-prepared, well-compensated workforce across the settings. EOEL shall promote the implementation of two elements related to workforce development. One is supporting early childhood professional preparation and development programs in obtaining and maintaining early childhood professional standards as they apply to the different early care and learning settings in Hawaii. And I do think some of our funding for our tuition support has really been helping with that first policy. The supporting is number one. Number two is promoting improvement in workforce compensation, inclusive but not limited to wages, salaries, and benefits, and institutionalizing equitable compensation structures. So here's actually a good opportunity when we think about how do we support legislative priorities? You know, is go back to your policy, kind of think about, okay, well, there's going to be, you know, currently, yes, we have, I mean, one of the things I would say that we have is a tuition stipend, which has really been helping our students. And these are the ones that are going to commit to work in an early learning program, early care and education program. But yeah, there's other opportunities, I think that, you know, that can come out of this one policy. I don't know, can anybody think of what other things that?
Well, so to Phil's question earlier about where does it go, this one was really for the board to really prioritize, I think, legislative priorities or what you the board would provide testimonies. And what bills the board would support. So it might vary, but I think a lot of these policies will be about what the board as a whole will support.
And does the board put the legislation in, or does EOEL put legislation?
We don't put legislation. EOEL proposes bills.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can, we can, yes, make recommendations, especially around funding. So we need to start looking at the budget closely. Do we need more funding? Does Yuko's office need more staff to do this work, you know? So yeah, that's.
And I think part of that, going to Phil's question is what Elaine had said earlier, what's already happening in our communities, around us that we can build off of that. So I mentioned that we've had a wage supplement bonus bill last year. I believe EOL testified in support of it. It's probably going to come back. That's something I think is going to take time for people to adjust to that. And I think we have to think about too, from a legislative perspective, what are other priorities? Because I believe with some of the things that did get passed last year, they probably need less money for nonprofits and other things, right? So based on some of the tax credits. Yeah, so being aware of what's going on, EOEL can propose through their government affairs, position and work with legislators to do that.
So there are state, sorry,
No,
you keep
you
raising
go
your
ahead.
hands and I just keep talking. Go ahead, you.
Oh, I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to have sort of like a power map of what decisions live where, so we can go to the governor, for example, or the lieutenant governor to kind of move a certain set of things. The legislature is going to move a set of things, but then you have the counties that are also the brokers of power around specific types of decisions. So it could be helpful to just kind of,
I think
what decisions live where, what levers live.
levers,
Yeah.
that's good.
I was thinking about different types of policy, right? So like there's a policy like what we can have as, or EOL can have. So for example, policy internally requiring that we have the parent feedback. I mean, it's already in state law, but requiring it as a procedure maybe. Within the ELB. And then there's state policy, right? Public policy. So,
I think that's important to think about those distinctions, like.
because there are
what's-
some things that do not need to be statewide,
Right.
and it does not need to go through legislation. It just needs to be something that we operate with, we
Yes.
have a procedure
Yes.
for,
Exactly.
to move things.
Yeah.
The ED evaluation.
Right,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
and then again. The thing about how. Like, so. How how EOEL looks and ELB looks in the public when we create some type of procedural like internal policy, such as requiring feedback for the ELB.
Yes.
Other things, like the executive director. Not compensation, what did you say? Evaluation.
Mhm.
A policy, that policy is important, but that's not something that gains favor with. But, you know, ensuring that we get, gaining favor so that we get funding. Sorry, I'm just thinking strategic.
Yeah, sure,
Things
sure.
to do, things that we can do that make sense
Yeah.
for
Mhm.
Hawaii while gains us favor.
Yeah.
Right, so.
Yeah.
And, sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it really leads for more discussion, you know, as a board. Yes, there are things that I think the board, in terms of a working board, should have some policies for yourselves, you know, as a board. And that there are these other things that impact the system, right? So you kind of keep going back to your role, you know, systems. And then, of course, because you're overseeing EOEL, it's what are those policies that really can help really make the work of EOEL effective?
Right, so like having the parent council, I mean, it's in. Saw language within state law 302L somewhere. And I can't remember where else I saw it, but creating a procedure within the ELB, that's something we would want put out as communications to
Yes.
help us find parents.
Yes.
To help us find parents and to also, in the meantime, just organically gain us favor.
Yeah,
That we're
yeah,
doing these
exactly.
things,
So you're
right?
looking at it
We can help.
strategically in the
We're
community.
looking for parents from
Mhm.
different places throughout Hawaii,
Mhm.
from the rural places of Ka'u
Mhm.
to Makaha, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway,
Mhm. So,
I think we think about legislators as partners though, all the town halls they do, all like.
Yeah.
And
meeting
how to
parents
leverage
where
that.
they're at.
and the neighborhood board.
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
because those are right on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's important.
And then that map from a funder's perspective is very important too, where we can see where policies are being driven, where there may be an influx of funds, but also what's incubating. So
Yes.
may need a little fire to get started
Yeah.
and then it can be passed on.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
super
Mhm.
important.
Yes. Work on the finance. piece.
Yeah. So I really appreciate hearing this. Okay, these first few months since I become chair have been kind of consumed with laying the foundation for the functioning of the board. Okay, so I think we're almost there. Once we pass the bylaws, and then I think we can have these meatier discussions at board meetings so that the public can hear and we can gain favor. We are showing that we are deliberating and wanting the best for children and families. So I just wanted to, you know, I have been like 24/7. How do we make this?
Yeah.
And after today, I'll be better. So
You've
I
been great.
appreciate it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, Elaine, and it takes all of us together, but it
Yes.
does, I think knowing that the public has, you know, it's always observing. I mean, you're also the eyes and ears for the public, but the public is observing them. It is a public entity, and so I think that's really important to think about, like, are we really making some difference? And what kind of feedback can we get, you know, from the public and others to get to? So, yeah, so this type is really kind of this discussion. One of the things that I brought up was because we talked about infants and toddlers is what kind of policy could promote access to high quality infant and toddler education? I just pose that, is that, I put it down as maybe a an example of a policy recommendation, but more of a question. So it's something that I think you just have to think about. And then Elaine had brought up more the second question about making sure that the funding that's used is not supplanting other funding. So what kind of policy could promote collaboration and efficient use of funding, such as not supplanting existing funds, such as maybe helping to encourage more graded funding, the use of private funding to seed pilots, which is kind of what Nicole just mentioned.
Is these special funds still in place? That's still in place, right? The early learning special fund. With
Yeah, so the early learning special fund is still there. So there was there were two special funds that EOL had. One of them was just called our regular early learning special fund. The other one was our early childhood educator stipend special fund. The stipend one had already sunset. That's the one that we're trying to clean up. So it had sunsetted, but we're keeping this in and we can fold.
Because there wasn't a date on that one.
Not the regular early learning special fund, but the early childhood educator stipend. So there's a little thing that we're. Okay. Oh, anyway, so this one, this one's sunset. We're trying to get that cleaned up. That's the one that we had passed. So we're actually working on that because there's some really weird things that happen on the back end on the state budget side about switching numbers between the two of them and reading things and what have you. But whatever they decide at the end, that special fund has to stay.
Okay, yeah. And so, and I just asked that because anyway.
So that's important. Yeah, but it is important to know that we do have the special fund, right?
Because anybody can give to the special fund.
Yes.
Right? Like the public, if they wanted to, if we did a campaign, $5, $10, 20, whatever you like. We are focusing, the children are our future. The children are the center of what we are focusing on as a state. Sorry, I'm just speaking. If I was governor, this is what I would say. We are focusing on the babies.
Yeah, but you're also thinking about, how would we do that? We would have to do something. Yeah.
But can I perhaps talk about a heretical idea?
Yeah.
So in the early 2000s, I was head of High Tech Development Corporation, and we were primarily trying to get legislature was trying to get lots of money into startup tech companies in Hawaii and stuff. And so during one of the sessions, they said, where's the money that we're already putting out there? So they asked us to do a study of how many organizations were being funded to work on this. And it turned out that there were like 40 some nonprofit and for-profit organizations getting state money to help the startups. But the result was that about 40% of the state money was going to the administration of 40 different organizations instead of not going to the actual startups. So the next session, the state killed about 20 of those organizations, which didn't make them happy. But in the end, a lot more money actually got to startups. So I don't know, given the long list of organizations, if at some point we want to take a look at how much of the state's money for early development and federal money is going to the administration of too many different organizations trying to do the same thing.
So we're a little bit in the process of that. So EOEL had applied. So let me back up. So last year when I went to the Hunt Institute, there was a representative that was there with me who happened to sit on a session with the Children's Funding Project, and he came back and he kind of said, you guys need to have a fiscal map assessment for Hawaii. And so I jumped on their webinar and then we applied, and then EOEL was selected to be Hawaii was selected to be a part of their board. So we're partnering with ECAS, so they're helping us with that. So we've already connected the Choice in 20 project to all of the budget heads of different state and also BNF. And then they're in the middle of conversations and one-on-ones, even down to the counties and mayors too. So they're like right in the middle of all of this, and they already pulled all of the federal side. We've already sent over all of our state docs and things, so they're pulling it out. And so I think if you look back on a few slides, I'm pretty sure I presented it this year. I'm not sure, but we can look at another one. But there's a link to some of their prior fiscal maps that they've done with other cohorts. But my hope is that when we get our comprehensive needs assessment from our PDGB5 grant, when we get our fiscal map, you know, all of these pieces, like it'll all fold in together, and then we can make a really good next state plan. So this is a question that we did have, like, who's getting money? Where is it going? What is it being used for? Hopefully we can see how much is being utilized or not utilized, and then we can dig further into certain pockets to see, even though it's dropping there and they're using it for this purpose, what else could it actually be used for when it's dropped into that bucket? And so I think when we talk about funding and things like that, I kind of want to see it from that perspective. Like who's getting it, where's it going, how much is being spent or not spent, what is it being used for, what are other flexibilities of that bucket? So I'm hoping, they said that it's gonna be done by December.
But just for early learning.
No, it's actually it's all children, so from birth to 22 or 20.
No way.
Oh.
This is only for Hawaii?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I've been asking.
Yeah,
It's so necessary.
yeah.
Oh, it's
That's good.
so helpful.
Yeah, so that information will be really good for all of us, for all, you know, the board. We think about funding and where that's going. One of the things I put as example, maybe as a non-policy recommendation, trying to figure out how to write this, but I thought, now that we have county representatives on our early learning board, that a type of non-policy is that early learning board county representatives will expect respective county early childhood coordinators to do a county plan following the early childhood state plan. So I'm not sure exactly if I worded it correctly, but
Yeah. So this is the hard part, is that we need to coordinate, we don't have authority over that county
counties.
coordinators. Can we make a recommendation to the county? So again, where is it going? But if the board passes a recommendation, that would go to the counties.
Yeah.
And then maybe we would have to think about who's gonna work on it with the counties or whatever. So, yeah, it's gonna take some.
Oh, and it doesn't need to be a county policy because they're already a county early childhood.
Right,
They're
so
already
it's
with
kind
the
of a
county.
recommendation.
So it'll be a procedure under the counties to be required for them to.
And
do.
they would have to.
They would have to make a
Make
decision.
that-
They would have to-
Yeah. they would have-
Flip, so what if it's the early childhood state plan requires county participation?
Yes.
We don't have the authority, I
The
don't
state
think,
and
right,
the county.
to require, that's why. it
So
can't
that's
be
not
our
required,
policy.
but
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but recommended.
recommended
Yeah.
input.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so,
so-
yeah.
So one of the things that when I was the county coordinator of Maui, at that time, we had a state early childhood coordinator in the governor's office. And she came to visit the counties, and we had been working as a group actually on a state plan many years ago. So what we did on Maui was that they came to visit us and we said, oh yeah, let's work. We decided on our own that we should work on a county plan.
Makes sense.
And we should try to at least follow some of the way it's structured, but it was still very county specific because that's where our relationships were. And at the time, of course, I had to then we had to consult with their mayor, make sure that, that was when the legal was there, whether she was okay with the plan or the direction of it. And so eventually we had a Maui plan. And that helped us for many years to stay on target. And it really helped me as a coordinator because I felt like sometimes I was all over the place because everybody's asking me to do something.
Right.
And when I had a plan, I could say, no, it's not
It's
a
already-
plan.
Yeah.
You know, let's focus on this
So-
first. But it did help, I think. So having that partnership, I think, between the state and the county, of course, there's state services that go to the county, and there's a different type of relationship there. You know, but I think it would be good to have something like that. And we're thinking about Greg's plan. Yeah, great.
Something that might be interesting is last session, there was a bill passed to create a task force to make recommendations to overhaul the state planning statute. And the task force, I think, lives in DBED, or is administratively attached to DBED. And includes county representation, but it's that chunk of statute that covers like the state goals, the state definition of a healthy economy, the state planning code, the climate change stuff is in there. So that's like both, that statute itself is both like an opportunity, and then the commission is also, or the task force is also an interesting opportunity where you've got county and state coming together.
That is interesting.
Yeah, DBED's been running these focus groups in all these areas. We did this survey on what are Hawaii's hardships in, and then they collected hundreds of feedback and stuff, and then they divided it into health and education and housing and stuff. And then they formed focus groups. Hey, what are we going to do about these hardships? And it's supposed to go back to the development of the state.
Which we have a state early childhood plan, but it seems like there are lots of early childhood plans. And like numbers and goals, and so what is maybe a little P policy for us is to develop, like, what are the guiding metrics, or like, what is the process, or how will we understand the health of our system?
With our preschool development grant right now, there's some, one is to finish a needs assessment and then start working on the next plan. So I think the state plan, I feel like the state plan might not change so much, but those other plans that you talk about, Stephanie, these are the strategic implementation plans. Because I've been working on the workforce one. And I feel like, oh yeah, we need to update this.
There's like roadmaps and plans and metrics everywhere.
So the way that I understood that it kind of came about was that there was a comprehensive needs assessment prior that was actually happening. But then the state plan needed to be developed, so then the state plan was developed. And then the comprehensive needs assessment was finished. And then that's what created the strategic implementation plans. So this connection is very, very loose. They kind of correlated together, but it was not like comprehensive needs assessment drives your plan, which drives your strategic implementation. It was like not that process. And so that's, it took a little bit of time to issue the comprehensive needs assessment contract, but it's moving right now. But personally, I'm not trying to create the plan until I have the comprehensive needs assessment finished. And so, and also, if there's a way to either align or fold in, or, something so that it's not like all these miscellaneous loose documents that don't seem connected together, I would love to see how that could be possible.
I think about the Aloha Plus dashboard as like maybe a parallel example of a strategic dashboard of metrics that gather data from everywhere in the state, but are like a very sort of concise, fine-tuned set of things to look at. And I think to develop that, they did focus groups all across the islands with lots of different people to try to understand, like, what is a green workforce mean? What are the metrics for that? But they also, they're not like just education. So there's like so many different factors that have to be pulled into it, which is probably a good parallel for our system. Yeah, I agree. And I think, like really determining those measures is really critical. So, so I didn't really realize that, that the board previously had asked like for the dashboard. And so in 2023, like all of a sudden, like I heard that there's a dashboard, but it did not connect to me at all because nobody had really asked for it or worked on it, or I didn't see it. And then in 2023, we started to kind of like put together these measures and metrics, and is this okay to measure whatever? But like it was for the plan that started in 2019. So personally, I kind of felt like it's rubbish. Like we did not track or monitor anything since the life at the beginning. We did not even know what metrics we were going to be looking at. I think the big learning from that is just like, I don't want to do that again. And so
That's a good learning.
Yeah,
That's a valuable learning.
So I think like if we have very clear metrics, then we can start the tracking, over the course of it to see progress or dips in things, and for whatever reason it might happen. So I think that those are like all of these little tidbits of learning is what we're hoping to roll forward into the next one. So I mean, not that it was not good effort and like whatever. I think that was the very first early childhood state plan, and but somehow like the mismatch between the plan, the comprehensive needs assessment, strategic implementation plan, the dashboard, the metrics, like it was kind of like it was kind of pieced together. And then honestly, I felt if it was important, I really felt like it should have been tracked and monitored and looked at more often. But again, it did not belong to any soul, anything. It belonged to everybody. And I think that that's something that we should think about. It's like, who will hold it? Because it's like, we have all these people, but like, it's also nobody. So like, how do we make sure that it's important enough to track and monitor and goals that we really want to achieve?
Yeah, that's a really important piece because, yeah, we don't want to, lessons learned, right? And that was I was involved with at least one of the strategic implementation plans, and it was a little confusing about even how he was on it to help with the development of that and his tracking and stuff. So yeah, I think some lessons learned from that would be helpful as we move forward in developing new plans. And the strategic implementation plans ended in 2023. So yeah, good time for us to revisit. But as people mentioned, some of the data and needs assessment would be helping get some data. Yeah, this one was another way of thinking, also making policy recommendations. When we're thinking about one of the things in the early learning board was to have a professional system framework. I think it might mean professional development system framework, not sure, but on the professional development side, I do want to say that there's already some documents, recognized documents that talk about if you're developing a professional development system for a mixed delivery system, which would be programs like Head Start, would be, pre-K, would be infant, toddler, family childcare centers, is how to think about, and these are just questions came out of this one document. How does this whatever we're trying to promote, how does it promote, well, the system we're trying to develop, how does it promote integration across the sectors, the settings? And that's one thing. How does it also include quality assurances for professional development? How does it support professional diversity and equitable access to professional development? How does it increase compensation parity across early childhood sectors and settings? So this is just an example on slides of, how to think about if one of our system components is this professional system framework, how do we think about it? As far as, eventually making policy. So that was just another example that we could consider.
I'm also just thinking about the compensation parity.
Yeah.
Versus across early childhood education. I mean, maybe it's just across childhood, across the education system period. Right, like, rather than separating it,
Yeah, yeah,
because it helps with the mindset change,
yeah, no, that's true, that's
you
true,
know, because.
yeah.
I feel like you
Yes.
have to separate it in terms of legislation though.
Well. It's just a different. Yeah, it's a theory, I guess.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
more direct. Thinking about how you speak about it.
Yeah.
To influence mindset changes.
Yeah.
Because this is about education, this is about. Anyway,
Yeah,
you know, it's not just early learning.
yeah,
Education,
Yeah.
right? It's not just early childhood education. This is about education.
Yeah.
Period.
Or is it early care and
yeah.
education?
Early care.
Or,
I think we gotta add the early care in, because then that's our infant and tots, and we haven't been looking at that for so
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
as ELB, so if by adding that term in, then it kind of shows it like a continuum,
Right.
which is, I think we're almost trying to work backwards with ELB, where we have public pre-K. And then we're like, hey, but here's
What
the
about
infant.
if it's a
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just starting to bring education
The
as a
socialization.
primary
yeah,
focus
Yeah.
of early care.
Yeah.
Early childhood
Mm.
care.
Yeah.
Right, just
that they are always learning.
yeah.
that they're always
Yeah,
learning.
starting.
Right, it may not be academic,
Yeah.
ABCs and reading,
Right.
but they're
Right,
learning.
they're learning. They're learning.
So maybe just, as a starting point. At early learning board, we refer to early care and education. Early care and education.
Socializing those terms to get
Yeah,
that out
so
there.
Taking out the myths.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that they're learning all the time. Sometimes things we don't want them to learn,
Yeah.
they're in settings
They are
where,
definitely.
and they're learning, but. Then they come to school and they stay hitting, their friend, because that's all they've learned so far. So we have to give them alternatives. So something to think about, yeah? Do we as a board want to, so maybe that's a point of discussion. Do we want to be consistent in saying early care and education? Are we gonna run into? I don't know, legislators gonna say, what you talking about, you guys
You're just
are early
babysitting.
learning board.
You're
They are
just
learning all the
talking
time.
about babysitting,
Yeah,
but I just feel like it has to start somewhere.
yeah, sure.
A mindset change has to start somewhere.
Yeah,
And why not us?
yeah.
Why- I mean,
Yes.
shouldn't it
I
be
think
us?
it
Yes,
should
right.
be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then once we start saying it over and over,
Yeah.
it becomes instilled in the minds of the
Yes. Yeah.
educators,
Yeah.
everyone,
Yes.
legislators.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're gonna run into statute issues with that.
Will we? Yeah, I think I wonder about that.
Cause I don't think.
Are we? You think so?
Well, cause in this, it says
Explicitly.
it's early learning, so it's like means a developmentally appropriate early childhood from prenatal care until they enter kindergarten. So I don't think we can,
Change
unless you change the
unless we change it.
definition.
Maybe that could be a policy.
I like early learning though, so because
Yeah.
early learning, it's broad.
Yeah.
Like it's really, really, I don't mind saying, I call it early care and education. And the reason why I say that is because it is care and it is education together. So that's why I say it. The early learning part, I like the flexibility and the broadness of it, because then it gives us a little bit. It gives EOL flexibility on certain pieces to call it early learning, because it's from prenatal to, well, we say kinder, but it can go as high as.
Well, and caring is also a function of learning and education,
That's your relational
social
piece.
learning, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, I worry separating them actually reinforces the dichotomy.
Yeah.
It's like if we were to say care and, it's,
So early,
like
just
early
stick with
learning.
early learning.
Early learning.
I think too, from like a county's perspective. When you delve into the word education, that's looked at as state responsibility, so it's like, that's, I think, gonna be
Oh.
a barrier. Also, just in terms of like cohesive language,
Mhm.
because then if you look at. that's, so then, so say we're now saying early care and education, but then this group is saying early learning, or, you know, so it's making sure we're using this. I think early learning is broad enough to cover that without necessarily getting into the distinction.
So counties
Okay.
all call it early.
I'm not sure what the other counties refer to it as, specifically, but I know that there typically is, they steer clear of saying education
So they
because,
sometimes say early childhood.
yeah, early
Early
childhood.
childhood too. Yeah, so there are languages or use of language for different reasons, for one thing. But I do think that as a board, for there's one thing about the language, but it's also and sometimes it gets in the way, but for us to, for the board to also think about how sometimes the mindsets are, and I think that's part of the discussion, is that sometimes people's mindsets are around these words. So how do we really help unpack them sometimes so people can understand what we mean? So there'll be times that you might have to explain what we mean.
I think oftentimes we can get really heavy with work like this.
Yeah.
And so at some point, it's probably important for us to think about how do we move hearts and what experiences do we support or incentivize or facilitate or coordinate to make this real for people. Because you can talk about it all day.
Yeah, how to make it.
Yeah, I mean, I
it's
think about
different.
the differences when I worked in a pre-K classroom versus had my own kids, like that, even those, like, people are gonna change their hearts and their minds through experiences.
Yeah, that's true. So we think back about lived experiences.
Yeah.
Centered design, yeah. So that was just, again, a way to think about it. This part, I think, Elaine, we wanted to think about next steps for the board, and you and I were talking about the structuring or organizing the committees. What could be possible.
Right,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm trying to be really careful about not discussing
Board things.
board agenda items, but just to let you know, again, you saw on the agenda that there are a couple of committees that are proposed, so that, so again, your comments and questions in those discussions will be very important. And I think for new board members, looking at where your strengths would be utilized on a committee. You know, thinking about that, how you want to contribute. So I think we can make a difference. We can make a difference for our Keiki and their Ohana. And consequently the state, you know, so we are at an important point, and we have mechanisms that we didn't have 20, 30 years ago. We have EOEL now, we have, you know, this new board that has geographic representation, because the previous board, there was one neighbor island representative that was appointed by the Hawaii Council of Mayors. So there was not equitable representation. So it really helps that we have this representation, because each county is so unique. You know, we have 3 islands. Hawaii Island is almost like 2 islands. You know, and so it's just each county is unique. Think about your strengths, where you want to make a difference, you know, and contribute. And so I can't direct anybody. Yeah, you only see where you fit and want to contribute. And just, you know, it's an ongoing thing. I'm not requiring everybody to be on a committee right away. You know, it's just what you think you would be able to make a contribution. The other thing I'm thinking that came up I want you to reflect on whether this morning was a good use of your time. Whether something like this where we can have more of a open discussion rather than, the meetings we have very, we're constrained by the meeting structure. And we had passed a travel policy of having at least one in-person meeting a year. Think about whether this morning session would be something that we would want to continue in. Not October, because it's fall break. September would be probably at this point, just from my limited experience, September would maybe be a good month to get a new board member on board and, have these more open discussions. So I would welcome your feedback as you think about that, whether this was a good use of your time and whether we should do this morning session annually in addition to the board meeting, or just have that board meeting as an annual in person. Okay, so that's that. I know I'm open to action steps.
Yeah, and the other is, for this first one, Elaine and I spent time talking about it over periods of weeks and then started to put something together. But the agenda can be what you folks want too. Right. I mean, Elaine wanted, so I said, okay, let's go for it. But yeah, I mean, because some of the topics that you've brought up today and the discussions we've had, that's required a little bit more, discussion than just being in your meeting time. I mean, I think about the dashboard discussion, that's one I think could take some time to do, other things. But yeah, certainly those kinds of topics can be part of, just let Elaine know and could structure it that way too.
I do appreciate opportunities to learn, not just about like both what's happening here in our system, what are different parts of the system experiencing, whether it's by county or some other way. And then opportunities to learn about what's happening elsewhere, maybe what some of the national organizations are working on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to create some kind of schedule
Yeah.
for presentations, because we have, just on our board, we have DHS, DOE, DOH, we have HIS and Kamehameha. What's happening in all those arenas as well as, national. So, so using board time to learn about what's happening locally up to nationally is.
Because it's felt like an opportunity to be a little bit more like, I know technically it's just as formal as our meetings, but something about it feels a little bit more.
Flexible.
Yeah.
That's kind of.
That's a great word. Yeah. Flexible. Yeah.
How do I say it?
Gonna violate sunshine law.
Yeah. Is somebody listening and they're gonna like write it down and then,
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, this is, of course.
It's an open meeting.
It's an open meeting, but I did check with Kevin, nobody's signed up. I think everyone's busy anyway. But no, I think that too. I think it's hard in the board meetings to get everything, and so that's why having opportunities like this can happen. I think one of the things that Elaine just mentioned, some kind of rotation of certain speakers representing different organizations to be at the board meetings would be helpful. Because one of the things is to help build on what's already there, right? Beginning to see the connections and networks and things like that.
So Yuko had suggested that we get Patch to come in. So we've already started talking to Patch because they have a whole bunch of initiatives that many of us learned about from the symposium when they had the gallery walk. And so maybe in November, we'll get Patch to come in to tell us about their initiatives.
Yes.
Because that really builds on the our workforce policy.
And also the families that really access Catch. too.
Yeah,
I think it's
yeah.
Helpful to hear.
We've been like fishbowl conversations with families or
Yeah.
like center directors.
Yes,
or,
yes,
Like
yes,
preschool teachers from Ready Kiki, like
Yeah.
just subsets of different.
yeah. And so you see by that diet that, Elaine had made about all the organizations, and you see, there's, of course, our state agencies. And nonprofits, but we do have a number of coalitions. I think like, Stephanie, you mentioned, because yeah, the Child Care Business Coalition, there's also the Can't Be Fat UK, which is a coalition of directors. They started off initially as Castle colleagues, because they had gone through some training in the past. They wanted to stay together. So there's these networks that have continued to be formed because of a purpose for their own, usually more like an affinity group, right? That's helpful. Yeah, so let's start to do that first. And then even among yourselves, in terms of who's on the board, and yeah, who can represent or talk about the initiatives that are going on related to this particular space.
Burning questions or comments?
I think this is very, very helpful for me as a brand new member. I think doing it every year at the beginning of the year is a great idea. So I have a question for Terry.
Yes.
I'm also on the teacher standards board.
Yes.
Last session, they had a
Oh,
thing
yes.
where you integrated your early learning and
Yeah.
elementary.
Okay. Well, sort of.
Sort of, okay.
So, so the college bed has had a dual elementary early childhood education degree, a bachelor's degree leading to a teacher license. And that actually was the program that I was hired to help teacher candidates grow in, but
But it wasn't statewide, correct?
yes, it wasn't statewide, it was just a Oahu piece, so it was primarily Manoa students.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but in the process, so when I was hired by Don Young, he actually wanted me to reanalyze that, whether and how well it was working, but I thought we'd just wait a while until we could kind of figure this out. So, but in the process of making any changes to that, we did start a statewide, several years ago, a statewide bachelor's degree in early childhood special education. So that's been going on for a number of years, and that one is really what they call a blended program. So you're getting really both general education, but also special education. And this one has a pre-K to third degree. Then again, going back to the existing one, we had a dual degree, elementary ECE, and most of the students who took it really wanted to stay in the lower grades if they could. And sometimes, of course, they went up to upper elementary. But one of the things that we found that we really felt strongly that we just needed an early childhood education degree, a singular pathway. And so what Phil is talking about, we just got approved by Hawaii Teacher Standards Board to have a statewide bachelor's degree, infants to third grade. And it is a statewide, because we've been working with the community colleges, for community college, Hawaii, Hansisi, and also Maui, so people can take that and begin to finish their associates for those who are coming through the community college, and they come up for the last 2 years in our college education. But it'll be statewide, it'll be primarily online, but it'll be probably taught more in the early evening to accommodate for people who are working. So that is being launched now that we got approval, Phil, I can talk about it. So now it's going to be launched in fall of 25. So we're gonna start doing marketing around that. So the community colleges know about it already, but we have to get it out to our advisors and to.
Does the early education, the stipend fund, that would cover
That
that?
would cover that, yes, yeah,
That's
let's
awesome.
cover that. Yeah, and second's really fun.
For the 4-year degree as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
covers the 4-year degree.
Wow.
So, yeah,
So I didn't fully understand it at that meeting because they went through it pretty fast.
yeah,
So thank you.
yeah, that's, so we're excited about that. Yeah. Thank you, Dana. Yeah, I'm excited. So, yeah, so there's that, so things are happening, it's slow moving, it takes time before this really happen, but it's getting there.
And I think I was, when we talked about the professional standards and competencies, one of Hawaii Careers with Young Children, the work group has been working on Emalama Inakeki, which is the early childhood standards and competencies for Hawaii, which was developed back in 2012. And then Tara and her team and that team have really adapted, incorporated the national standards. When the national standards first came out, what I noticed was in Emalama that was not in any of the national documents was the concern about wellness for all, for children and their people who are caring for them. And our document, the Hawaii document, mentions spirituality as a core component of the entire
Yeah.
child.
Right, and
So-
also our Hawaii document really emphasized our context.
Yeah.
In Hawaii and all the families and children, and so, yeah, what we're doing, we're on like the 7th or 10th version. But we're now beginning to take it out to different stakeholder groups. So this is the Emalama Inakeki. Eventually, we'd like to, be working, talking to Dana about this, but we'd like to eventually replace what's in the registry, a workforce registry. So that those who are taking professional development could use that document to guide them in terms of profession. So that's something we're working on.
So there's all these arenas too of the professional development, because DOE and then therefore the EOEL teachers, they have a very defined professional development plan and structure. Emalama is not looking, can be used, they're actually using the professional standards and competencies. But in the DHS registered programs and licensed programs, it's a different, working to build that system. So that's kind of what Ian has been working on. And, yeah, so there's
A bunch of things going on. So, yeah.
All at the same time.
Yeah.
all at the same time.
So that's what we're on multiple
We try to
meetings
link it.
together.
Yeah.
Like that puts on the compensation design team with me and, anyway, we're having these multiple conversations, but they're all good.
But it's
because-
good, yeah, because it's working together, right?
Uh-huh, it's
Coming
working
together.
together. Yeah. Coming together slowly. I think the attention that we're getting to politically is very helpful. I mean, it is, some of you have gone to lieutenant governor's meetings. It has been really quite remarkable, I think, that, this, sometimes we think our fragmented system, but we're all kind of sitting at these tables together. Just yeah, so.
We had scheduled a working lunch that just means you
It's
can talk
coming.
story.
Yeah, no,
yeah, so you can talk story.
She said they're coming, and then Lena and Ian went down, because she should be pulling in shortly. I just told her to come right up to the door, and then
Oh,
the period up here.
Yeah.
So it's right around the corner somewhere.
Okay,
Thanks,
yeah.
Thank you.
And still, there's still breakfast stuff too, so
Yeah.
maybe we should move out. help me with that, so yeah. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
I only have one comment or question.
Okay, Nicole has a question.
Just, I can just.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Hawaii State, early learning plan,
Yeah,
the revamp is coming out in 2025, it says. That's what the new comprehensive plan is at the bottom. Is that something that we're gonna start soon, or is it gonna be started soon? Who will
It's a
champion that?
PDG.
yeah,
That's
so
a-
it's a
Yeah,
PDG, so
PDG.
that's kind of connected.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they go finish the needs assessment, it was to be by the end of this year.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But I also understand for that, I think she's trying to get feedback, you know, the needs assessment process. So that's what I,
Okay.
yeah. But supposedly the plan is it's supposed to finish by end of December. And then that information will feed into the
The new plan, okay.
Yeah, so another thing that's happening.
Cause that was like, I was trying to think if we're gonna strategize to
Yes.
coordinate.
Right,
make
right,
sure
right.
What we need in there.
Right.
Hey, everybody, yeah, it's a working
Terry,
lunch
thank
meeting.
you.
Oh, you're welcome. It means that you're supposed to be telling stories, so, and very much.